Hi everyone, welcome to Regular Rampage. I hope you're all doing well. Today I want to argue that Mordecai from Regular Show didn't just make mistakes in his relationships, he systematically destroyed every romantic opportunity through a toxic pattern of indecisiveness, selfishness, and emotional immaturity that alienated both his love interests and the show's fanbase. Through his catastrophic wedding speech, his obsessive ex-girlfriend stalking, and his chronic inability to commit, Mordecai became the embodiment of everything audiences hate in a protagonist. Someone who repeatedly chose the worst possible option, at the worst possible time, turning what should have been a lovable slacker into one of Cartoon Network's most frustrating characters. But before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It's completely free, and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we've managed to build. Anyway, that's enough. Let's begin. Section 1. The nice guy who wasn't actually nice. When you first meet Mordecai in Regular Show, he seems like the better half of the main duo. While Rigby acts like a troublemaker who refuses to do any real work, Mordecai comes across as the more responsible friend. He speaks in a calmer voice. He sometimes tries to get work done before Benson yells at them. He acts embarrassed when Rigby does something stupid. On the surface, Mordecai looks like the guy you'd want as a friend. Someone who seems thoughtful, who cares about doing the right thing, who just wants to get through his day at the park without causing too much trouble. But if you actually pay attention to what Mordecai does instead of what he says, a different picture emerges. Mordecai isn't really the responsible one. He's just better at pretending to be responsible. He isn't actually kinder than Rigby. He's just better at hiding his selfish side behind a mask of being the good guy. And when Mordecai wants something badly enough, he'll throw anyone under the bus to get it, including his supposed best friend. The episode Do Me a Solid shows this side of Mordecai perfectly. The story starts with Mordecai and Rigby playing a game they call Solids. The basic idea is simple. If someone does you a favor, you owe them a solid. They start small, asking each other to change the TV channel or get a glass of lemonade. Harmless stuff between friends. But Skips warns them early in the episode not to abuse the power of solids, telling them that bad things will happen if they do. This warning becomes important later. Everything changes when Eileen shows up at the coffee shop where Margaret works. Eileen nervously asks Rigby if he wants to go play mini-golf with her and Margaret. For Mordecai, this is the perfect opportunity. He's been crushing on Margaret for a long time, and now he finally has a chance to spend time with her outside of just ordering coffee. There's only one problem. Margaret will only agree to go if Rigby comes along to be Eileen's date. It's a double date situation, and Mordecai needs Rigby to make it work. So what does Mordecai do? Does he ask his best friend nicely? Does he explain how much this means to him and hope Rigby will help him out? Number Mordecai makes it a transaction. He tells Rigby that if he goes on this double date with Eileen, Mordecai will owe him 10 solids. 10 instant favors that Rigby can cash in whenever he wants, and Mordecai has to do them no matter what. Think about what this means. Mordecai is basically bribing his best friend to go on a date with a girl Rigby doesn't want to date. He's using Rigby as a tool to get what he wants with Margaret. He doesn't care that Rigby feels uncomfortable. He doesn't care that Rigby has to spend his evening pretending to enjoy himself with Eileen when he clearly doesn't want to be there. All Mordecai cares about is getting his chance with Margaret, and if that means forcing Rigby into an awkward situation, then that's exactly what he'll do. The double date goes exactly as badly as you'd expect. They go mini-golfing, and Rigby uses his solids to make Mordecai embarrass himself in front of Margaret. He makes Mordecai do ridiculous things, forcing him to leave to get snacks during the movie, making fart noises with his hands, throwing napkins, basically ruining any chance Mordecai had of impressing Margaret. From Mordecai's point of view, Rigby is being a terrible friend and sabotaging his date. But here's the thing, Rigby is only doing exactly what Mordecai set up. Mordecai created this situation. He forced Rigby to go on a date he didn't want to be on. He treated his best friend like a bargaining chip instead of a person. And when Rigby naturally got upset about being used like that, Mordecai acts like he's the victim. The whole mess is Mordecai's fault from the start, but he can't see it because he's so focused on what he wants that he can't see how his actions hurt other people. The situation gets even worse when they get back to the house. Rigby uses his 9th solid to make Mordecai go buy ice cream sandwiches. When Mordecai returns, he discovers that Muscle Man and High Five Ghost have been invited to join them, which means his romantic evening with Margaret is completely ruined. Mordecai drags Rigby into the kitchen and confronts him about using all his solids to destroy the date. Rigby fires back that Mordecai's solid is ruining his life. Then Rigby whispers what his 10th and final solid is. The episode doesn't show exactly what Rigby asks for, but everyone who watches can tell it's something deeply embarrassing and humiliating. When Mordecai hears it, he immediately refuses. He won't do it. The problem is that Mordecai already agreed to the 10 solids deal. He made a promise, and now he's breaking it because following through would cost him his dignity. Because Mordecai breaks his word and refuses to do the final solid, the house literally starts tearing itself apart. The ground shakes, the staircase rips in half, the couch falls into a hole. Everyone's lives are in danger because Mordecai won't keep his promise. Even when Benson, Pops, and Skips show up and tell him he has to do it. Even when Skips hears what the solid is and confirms it's humiliating, but Mordecai still needs to do it, Mordecai refuses. Then Margaret says something that changes everything. She begs Mordecai to do the solid because she and Eileen do solids for each other all the time. And then she drops the bomb. She reveals that she only came on this double date as a solid for Eileen. She wasn't there because she wanted to spend time with Mordecai. She was there because her friend asked her to help set up Rigby. The entire evening that Mordecai forced Rigby into, the whole reason he made his best friend owe him 10 favors was based on something that wasn't even real. Margaret never wanted to date Mordecai that night. She was just being a good friend to Eileen. All of Mordecai's scheming, all of his manipulation, all of the pain he caused Rigby, it was all for nothing. And the worst part is that Mordecai still can't admit he was wrong. He eventually does the humiliating final solid to save everyone from the house collapsing, but he never apologizes to Rigby for putting him in this position in the first place. The episode ends with Rigby showing the recording he made of Mordecai doing the embarrassing solid to multiple people before finally destroying the tape to save their friendship. Mordecai forgives him, and they move on like nothing happened. But something did happen. Mordecai revealed that when he wants something, he'll sacrifice his best friend's comfort and dignity to get it. He'll make deals and then try to back out when they cost him too much. He'll blame everyone else when his selfish plans fall apart. This pattern shows up again in Think Positive, though in a different way. In this episode, Pops tells Benson that he has to stop yelling at Mordecai and Rigby or he'll get fired. Every time Benson yells, Pops gives him warnings until finally threatening to fire him if it happens again. The setup creates a situation where Mordecai and Rigby can do whatever they want without consequences because Benson physically cannot yell at them. So what do Mordecai and Rigby do with this power? They make Benson's day a living nightmare. They water the flowers with soda, and not just any soda, but Benson's diet soda that he drinks. When Benson points out you can't water flowers with soda, Rigby says at least it's diet so nobody drinks it. Benson has to tell them that he drinks diet soda, watching them waste something that belongs to him. They use a chainsaw to trim the hedges instead of doing it properly, cutting them completely in half and breaking the chainsaw in the process. They use sandpaper to dry off the cart, scratching it up. Everything they do is deliberately wrong, and they know it's wrong, but they do it anyway because they know Benson can't stop them. The thing is, Rigby acts like this all the time. Everyone expects Rigby to be lazy and cause problems. That's his whole character. But Mordecai usually positions himself as better than that. He's supposed to be the one who at least tries to do things right sometimes. But when given the chance to torture Benson without consequences, Mordecai jumps right in. He's not being forced into it like he forced Rigby into the double date. He's choosing to be cruel because it's funny to him. Later in the episode, when Benson's anger becomes so bottled up that it starts tearing the park apart, Skips tells Mordecai and Rigby to make Benson angry so he can release all that rage before it kills everyone. They try insulting him. Mordecai calls Benson a sorry excuse for a manager. He calls him a nasal-voiced loser loner. He tells Benson to go back to night school and learn to have a personality. And then Mordecai and Rigby both admit that they're the ones who keep sending pizzas to Benson's apartment, and they're the ones who switched his detergent with coffee. These confessions reveal that Mordecai and Rigby have been messing with Benson outside of work. They've been making prank calls to his home. They've been sabotaging his laundry. They've been going out of their way to make Benson's personal life worse, not just slacking off at their jobs. And Mordecai participated in all of it while still acting like he's more mature than Rigby. The episode shows Mordecai and Rigby at their most incompetent to make Benson look sympathetic. The show wants you to feel bad for Benson and understand why he yells so much. But even in an episode designed to make Benson the victim, Mordecai comes across as deliberately cruel rather than just lazy. There's a difference between not wanting to do work and actively trying to hurt your boss for entertainment. What makes Mordecai's behavior in both episodes so frustrating is the gap between how he sees himself and what he actually does. Mordecai thinks he's a good person. He thinks he's responsible. He thinks he's the mature one who has to deal with Rigby's nonsense. But when you look at his actual choices, Mordecai is just as selfish as Rigby. He's just better at justifying it to himself. Rigby will admit he's lazy. He'll own up to not wanting to do work. He doesn't pretend to be something he's not. But Mordecai wraps his selfishness in excuses. In Do Me a Solid, he's not using his best friend. He's just trying to spend time with the girl he likes. In Think Positive, he's not being cruel to Benson. He's just having fun because Benson can't yell for once. Mordecai always has a reason that makes him feel like the good guy, even when his actions prove otherwise. This matters because it sets up everything that comes next in Mordecai's story. The selfishness he shows in these episodes doesn't go away. It gets worse. It grows. It transforms from using his best friend for a date and pranking his boss into something much more destructive. Because when Mordecai's romantic feelings are involved, when he really wants something from a relationship, all of that hidden selfishness comes pouring out. The pattern is already there in Do Me a Solid. Mordecai wants Margaret, so he'll sacrifice Rigby. He'll make deals he doesn't intend to keep. He'll ignore how his actions affect other people as long as he gets what he wants. And when it all falls apart, when Margaret reveals she was never interested in him that night anyway, Mordecai doesn't learn anything from it. He doesn't realize that trying to force and manipulate situations never works. He just moves on to the next scheme, the next plan, the next way to try to make things work with Margaret. The nice guy mask that Mordecai wears makes everything worse. If he was honest about being selfish like Rigby is honest about being lazy, at least people would know what they're getting. But Mordecai's act of being the reasonable, thoughtful, caring friend means that people trust him. They believe he has good intentions. They think he'll do the right thing when it matters. And then Mordecai betrays that trust over and over again, always with an excuse ready for why this time was different, why this time he had no choice. The truth is that Mordecai does have choices. He chooses to force Rigby into uncomfortable situations. He chooses to torture Benson for fun. He chooses to prioritize what he wants over what's fair or kind. And these aren't one-time mistakes. They're patterns that show who Mordecai really is underneath the nice guy act. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But if you think Mordecai using his best friend and pranking his boss is bad, you haven't seen anything yet. Because when Margaret actually becomes part of Mordecai's life, when she's not just a crush at the coffee shop but a real person he has real chances with, Mordecai's behavior crosses from selfish into something much darker. Section 2. The Margaret Obsession. When crushes become creepy. Having a crush on someone is normal. Going to a coffee shop because you want to see the person who works there is understandable. Everyone has felt nervous around someone they like or looked for excuses to be near them. These feelings are part of being human, part of growing up and figuring out relationships. But there's a line between having a crush and becoming obsessed, and Mordecai doesn't just cross that line. He sprints past it without looking back. From the very first season of Regular Show, Mordecai has feelings for Margaret. She works at the coffee shop across from the park with her friend Eileen. She's friendly, she's nice to Mordecai when he comes in, and she seems like a genuinely good person. Mordecai's interest in her makes sense. The problem isn't that Mordecai likes Margaret. The problem is how he goes about it. Mordecai and Rigby start going to the coffee shop constantly. Every episode in the early seasons seems to feature at least one scene where they're hanging out there. And while Rigby might genuinely want coffee or a snack, Mordecai's reasons for being there are always about Margaret. He makes up excuses to visit. He orders things he doesn't need. He hangs around longer than necessary just to be in the same room as her. He structures his entire day around opportunities to see her. At first, this seems kind of sweet. Mordecai is shy around the girl he likes. He doesn't know how to tell her how he feels. He's working up the courage to ask her out. The show plays it as romantic, as the awkward blue jay with a crush on the pretty bird who works at the coffee shop. Viewers root for him because everyone knows what it's like to be nervous around someone you're attracted to. But as the seasons go on, Mordecai's behavior around Margaret stops being endearing and starts being uncomfortable. He doesn't just visit the coffee shop sometimes, he's there all the time. He doesn't just think about Margaret occasionally, she dominates his thoughts and his decisions. He doesn't just hope she might like him back. He builds his entire sense of self-worth around whether Margaret pays attention to him. The show gives us glimpses of how deep this obsession runs. Mordecai will bail on his responsibilities at work if it means a chance to see Margaret. He'll change his plans at the last second if she's involved. He'll put himself in awkward or difficult situations just to be near her. And he doesn't seem to notice or care that Margaret hasn't actually shown that much interest in him beyond basic friendliness. She's nice to him because she's a nice person, and he's a customer. But Mordecai reads more into every smile, every conversation, every interaction than is actually there. This obsessive pattern reaches its most disturbing point in the episode Laundry Woes, which takes place at the start of Season 5. To understand why this episode matters, you need to know what happened right before it. At the end of Season 4, in an episode called Stake Me Amadeus, Mordecai finally worked up the courage to ask Margaret to be his girlfriend at a fancy restaurant. He thought everything was perfect. He thought she felt the same way. But Margaret pulled out an acceptance letter to Milton University, her dream college, and told Mordecai she had to leave. She rejected him, not because she didn't care about him, but because she had to choose between him and her future. She chose her future. Mordecai was heartbroken. The show portrays his depression through a montage at the start of Laundry Woes. He grows a beard. He stops taking care of himself. He sits around looking miserable. His friends try to cheer him up. Slowly, over time, he seems to get better. He shaves the beard. He starts participating in activities again. He reads books and hangs out with the group. To everyone around him, including Rigby, it looks like Mordecai is finally moving on from Margaret leaving. Then Mordecai and Rigby go to do laundry. While sorting through the clothes, Mordecai notices a pink sweater. He picks it up and holds it. Rigby immediately warns him not to do what he's thinking about doing. Rigby can see what's about to happen and tries to stop it, but Mordecai doesn't listen. He brings the sweater up to his face and takes a big sniff of it. The moment Mordecai smells the sweater, he's flooded with memories of Margaret. The show plays a montage of all their best moments together. Times they laughed, times they smiled at each other, happy memories from when Margaret was still around. Mordecai becomes lost in these memories, completely forgetting where he is or what he's doing. When he comes back to reality, he tells Rigby that the sweater belongs to Margaret and that she must have left it behind for him to find. He decides he needs to return it to her. Think about what Mordecai is saying here. Margaret left for college. She made her choice. She told Mordecai she had to move on with her life. Months have passed since she left, and Mordecai finds one sweater in the laundry and immediately decides this is a sign, a message from Margaret that he's supposed to chase after her. He's creating a story in his head where Margaret deliberately left this sweater so Mordecai would have a reason to see her again. Rigby tries to talk sense into him. He points out that women collect clothes all the time. He says if it was really Margaret's favorite sweater, she wouldn't have left it behind. He tries to make Mordecai see that he's reading meaning into something that doesn't have any meaning. But Mordecai won't listen. He's already decided what this sweater represents, and no amount of logic from his best friend can change his mind. Mordecai says he'll just mail the sweater to Margaret instead of actually going to see her. Rigby agrees this is better. At least Mordecai won't be driving to her college. But when they get in Muscleman's car, which Mordecai borrowed for this errand, Mordecai drives right past the post office. Rigby asks why he didn't stop. Mordecai makes an excuse about looking for parking. Rigby immediately realizes what's happening. Mordecai lied about mailing the sweater. He's planning to drive all the way to Margaret's college to deliver it in person. When Rigby calls him out on this, Mordecai admits it. He's driving to Milton University. Rigby points out that this is a 20-hour drive. 20 hours in a car to return a sweater to someone who left you behind and moved on with her life. Rigby, Mordecai, this is just an excuse to see Margaret, that he's being obsessive and needs to let her go. Mordecai denies it and keeps driving. Rigby, knowing his friend is making a huge mistake, decides to force the issue. He grabs the sweater and throws it out the window of the moving car. Problem solved, right? No more sweater means they have to turn around and go home. Except a police officer happens to be driving behind them, sees the sweater fly out the window, and pulls them over. The cop picks up the sweater and returns it to them, telling them they should be more careful because he's seen too many good clothes lost on the highway, and this is a quality sweater. So now they have the sweater back, and Mordecai is convinced this is another sign that he's meant to deliver it to Margaret. He keeps driving. Rigby realizes he can't physically stop Mordecai from doing this, so he tries a different approach. He tries to make Mordecai see how crazy he's being. During the drive, Mordecai starts falling asleep at the wheel because he's been driving for so long without rest. The car drifts toward the side of the road and Rigby has to yell at him to wake up and get back on the road. Mordecai looks terrible. He's exhausted, he's not thinking clearly, but he refuses to stop or turn around. Rigby starts rapping at him, pointing out that Mordecai is not fine, that he's being obsessive about the sweater, that he's using it as an excuse to chase after Margaret when he should be moving on with his life. In the rap, Rigby calls Mordecai a sad sack chump. This insults Mordecai so much that he actually kicks Rigby out of the car. He pulls over, makes his best friend get out, and then drives away, leaving Rigby on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. Mordecai is so consumed by his need to see Margaret that he abandons the person who's been trying to help him, the person who cares enough to tell him the truth, even when it's hard to hear. Now alone in the car, Mordecai's lack of sleep catches up with him. He starts hallucinating. The laundry in the car comes to life and forms into a ghost version of Margaret. This ghost Margaret is made entirely of clothes, and she talks to Mordecai in Margaret's voice. She tells him that returning the sweater is all that matters. She encourages him to forget about Rigby because Rigby will just get in the way. The ghost starts saying things that Mordecai wants to hear, that once he gives Margaret her sweater back, she'll quit college and be with him. They'll be happy together forever. And for a moment, Mordecai believes it. He wants to believe it so badly that he can't see how ridiculous it is. But then the ghost goes too far. When she says Margaret would quit school for him, something clicks in Mordecai's brain. He knows Margaret worked really hard to get into college. He knows she wouldn't just throw that away. He realizes the ghost is saying things he wants to hear, not things that are real. The ghost Margaret gets angry when Mordecai starts to question her. She grabs the brake and forces the car to keep going. She tells Mordecai he can't fight it, that he has to return the sweater. Mordecai struggles with this hallucination while driving, fighting for control of the car. He's arguing with his own imagination, with his own obsessive thoughts that have literally taken the form of the girl he can't let go of. The struggle ends when Mordecai crashes the car into a statue at Margaret's college. He nearly runs over a new student who's walking across campus. When he comes back to his senses, he realizes the ghost Margaret was never real. It was just laundry the whole time. He hallucinated the entire thing because he's so sleep-deprived and so mentally unstable from his obsession with Margaret. Mordecai gets out of the destroyed car and sees Margaret in the distance. She's with her college friends, talking and laughing about their classes and their plans. She looks happy. She's moved on. She's built a new life at college, a life that doesn't include Mordecai. And watching her from afar, Mordecai finally realizes what Rigby has been trying to tell him all along. He needs to let her go. He walks toward a trash can and throws the sweater away. He doesn't try to talk to Margaret. He doesn't interrupt her new life. He just gets rid of the sweater and accepts that this chapter is over. Right after he does this, Rigby catches up. He apparently ran or hitchhiked the entire way to try to stop his friend from making this mistake. Rigby, exhausted, tells Mordecai not to give Margaret the sweater. Mordecai tells him it's fine because he already threw it away. They look back at Muscle Man's car and wonder if he'll notice the damage. The car is completely wrecked. There are dents everywhere from Mordecai driving while hallucinating, and it's crashed into a statue. As they're looking at it, the top part of the statue falls over and crushes the roof of the car completely. There's no way Muscle Man won't notice. This entire episode shows how far Mordecai's obsession with Margaret has gone. He didn't just want to see her or talk to her. He created an entire story where a forgotten sweater was a sign they were meant to be together. He drove 20 hours without sleeping. He abandoned his best friend on the side of the road. He fought with hallucinations. He crashed a borrowed car. He nearly hit a pedestrian. All of this for a sweater that Margaret probably didn't even remember owning. The scary part is that Mordecai truly believed he was doing the right thing. He thought returning the sweater was important. He thought it meant something. He couldn't see that he was using the sweater as an excuse to chase after someone who had already moved on. His friends could see it. Rigby definitely saw it and tried to stop him, but Mordecai was so deep in his obsession that he couldn't see the truth until he literally crashed into reality. This wasn't just a guy with a crush anymore. This was someone who couldn't let go, someone who would hurt himself and others in pursuit of something that wasn't even real. Margaret never asked him to return the sweater. She never suggested she wanted to see him. She never gave him any reason to think showing up at her college would be welcome. Mordecai created all of that in his own head because he couldn't accept that she had chosen her future over him. The episode tries to end on a hopeful note. Mordecai finally lets go of the sweater, finally accepts that Margaret has moved on. He apologizes to Rigby for kicking him out of the car and calling him names. Rigby apologizes for calling Mordecai a sad sack chump, though he immediately takes it back and says that depressed Mordecai actually is a chump, which is fair. They seem to be okay again, ready to move forward. But here's the problem. Mordecai didn't actually learn the lesson he needed to learn. He learned that he should give up on that specific sweater, on that specific attempt to see Margaret. He didn't learn that his whole approach to relationships is broken. He didn't realize that his obsessive behavior is unhealthy. He didn't understand that the way he fixates on one person and builds his entire emotional state around them is a problem that will keep coming back. The Margaret obsession revealed something important about Mordecai. When he wants someone, he can't think clearly. He can't see reality. He creates stories and signs and meanings where none exist. He ignores his friends when they try to help him. He makes terrible decisions and justifies them to himself. And most importantly, he can't let go even when letting go is the only healthy option. All of this obsessive behavior, all of these red flags, were happening over a relationship that never really existed. Mordecai and Margaret went on some dates. They had some nice moments together, but they were never actually together in any official way before she left for college. If Mordecai acted this crazy over losing something he never fully had, imagine how much worse he'd get if he actually dated someone and then things went wrong. You don't have to imagine it though, because eventually, Mordecai does get a real girlfriend. Eventually, someone actually gives him a chance at a real relationship. And when that happens, every single obsessive, selfish, emotionally unstable tendency he showed with Margaret comes roaring back. Except this time, he's not just hurting himself. This time, he's going to destroy someone who actually cared about him. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But before any of that can happen, Mordecai has to hit rock bottom. He has to experience the kind of rejection that breaks him completely, the moment when Margaret makes it crystal clear that they're never going to be together. And when that moment comes, it's going to make the sweater incident look like nothing. Section 3. Stake Me Amadeus. The rejection that broke him. After seasons of crushing on Margaret from afar, after countless trips to the coffee shop, after all the awkward conversations and missed opportunities, Mordecai finally decides to go for it. He's going to ask Margaret to be his girlfriend for real. Not just hint at it, not just hope she figures it out. He's actually going to say the words and make it official. This is the moment the show has been building toward since the very beginning. The episode, Stake Me Amadeus, is the finale of Season 4. Everything in it is designed to feel important, like this is a turning point in Mordecai's life. He makes reservations at a fancy restaurant. He gets dressed up. He's nervous but excited. This is it. This is the night when everything changes, when he finally gets the girl he's been chasing for years. The restaurant is exactly the kind of place you'd go for a special occasion. It's not the coffee shop where they usually hang out. It's not some casual spot in town. This is a real date at a real restaurant. The kind of place that shows Margaret how serious Mordecai is about her. He's putting in effort. He's showing her that she matters to him. Everything about the evening screams, this is important. Margaret seems to be having a good time. They talk, they laugh, they enjoy their meal together. From Mordecai's perspective, everything is going perfectly. This is what he imagined all those times at the coffee shop, all those moments when he wished he could just tell her how he felt. Now he's actually doing it, and she's right there with him, smiling and engaged and present. The moment feels right. So Mordecai takes a deep breath and asks her. He asks Margaret to be his girlfriend. He puts his heart out there, makes himself completely open and honest about what he wants. After all this time, after all the waiting and hoping and dreaming, he finally says what he's been wanting to say for years. Margaret's face changes. The smile fades a little. She reaches into her bag and pulls out an envelope. She shows it to Mordecai. It's an acceptance letter to Milton University, her dream college. She got in. She's going to attend one of the best schools she could possibly go to, a place that will set up her entire future career in journalism. Then Margaret tells Mordecai something that breaks his heart into pieces. She tells him that what they have is special. She acknowledges that their relationship was the first one that felt like it could actually go somewhere, that could turn into something real and meaningful. She's not saying she doesn't care about him. She's not saying she doesn't have feelings. She's saying the opposite. What they have matters to her. But she has to leave. She has to go to Milton University. She worked incredibly hard to get into this school. This is her dream, her future, everything she's been working toward. And as much as she cares about Mordecai, as special as their relationship is, she can't give up her dreams for a maybe. She can't stay here and wonder what could have been if she'd gone to college. She has to choose herself and her future. Margaret starts crying as she tells him this. This isn't easy for her either. She's not rejecting Mordecai because she doesn't like him or because she wants to hurt him. She's making an impossible choice between her heart and her head is winning because it has to win. She runs out of the restaurant crying, leaving Mordecai sitting there alone at the table. Mordecai is completely destroyed. He just got the answer he'd been afraid of all along. Yes, Margaret has feelings for him. Yes, they could have been together. Yes, what they have is special. But none of that matters because she's leaving anyway. In some ways, this rejection hurts more than if she just said no. She's saying yes to the feelings, but no to the relationship. And Mordecai has to live with knowing that they could have been happy together if the timing had been different. Later, we see Mordecai sitting on the roof of the house at the park. The sun is setting. Rigby is with him. Mordecai tells Rigby that he drove Margaret to the airport. He watched her leave. He said goodbye to the girl he'd been in love with for years, knowing he'd probably never see her again. At least, not in the same way. They sit there in silence, drinking sodas, not really knowing what to say, because what can you say when someone's heart is breaking? The episode ends there, with Mordecai heartbroken and alone on the roof. It's a sad ending, the kind that makes you feel for Mordecai even if you've been frustrated with him before. He finally worked up the courage to put himself out there, and he got rejected despite doing everything right. He took her somewhere nice. He was honest about his feelings. He made himself completely open. And it still wasn't enough, because sometimes life doesn't work out the way you want it to. But the story doesn't end there. The Season 5 premiere, Laundry Woes, shows us what happens to Mordecai after Margaret leaves, and it's not pretty. The episode opens with a montage showing Mordecai's depression. He stops shaving and grows a thick beard. He sits around the house looking miserable. He doesn't want to do anything or talk to anyone. He's completely shut down emotionally, unable to process the rejection and move forward with his life. The Mordecai we see in this montage isn't the same person from earlier seasons. This Mordecai is broken. His friends try to help. They organize activities to cheer him up. They invite him to hang out. They try to get him interested in things again. Slowly, bit by bit, Mordecai starts to come back. He shaves the beard. He starts participating in group activities. He reads books while sitting with everyone. To the people around him, it looks like he's healing, like he's finally getting over Margaret and ready to move on. But as we saw in the last section, Mordecai wasn't actually better. He was just hiding his obsession better. The moment he found Margaret's sweater, all that progress disappeared. He was right back to being completely consumed by thoughts of her, willing to drive 20 hours and destroy a car just for a chance to see her again. The depression never really went away. It just went underground. This pattern reveals something important about Mordecai's character. He doesn't know how to handle rejection in a healthy way. When Margaret turned him down, when she chose college over him, Mordecai completely fell apart. He didn't lean on his friends and work through his feelings. He didn't accept that sometimes things don't work out, and that's okay. He didn't grow or learn or become stronger from the experience. Instead, Mordecai spiraled. He let the rejection define him. He couldn't see past his own pain to understand that Margaret made the right choice for herself. She wasn't rejecting him as a person. She was choosing her future. But Mordecai couldn't separate those things in his mind. To him, Margaret leaving felt like proof that he wasn't good enough, that something was wrong with him, that he'd never be happy. Most people experience rejection at some point in their lives. It hurts. It's supposed to hurt. But healthy people eventually process that hurt and move forward. They understand that one person saying no doesn't mean they're worthless, or that they'll never find love. They take time to be sad, and then they pick themselves up and keep going. Mordecai couldn't do that. Months after Margaret left, he was still completely hung up on her. He'd made some surface-level progress. He could function in daily life, he could participate in activities, but emotionally he was stuck. He was stuck in that moment at the restaurant, when Margaret pulled out the acceptance letter. He was stuck watching her walk away. He couldn't let go, and couldn't move forward. This inability to process rejection shows a deep weakness in Mordecai's character. It shows that his sense of self-worth is too tied up in whether someone else loves him. It shows that he doesn't have the emotional strength to handle disappointment without falling apart. And most importantly, it shows that Mordecai doesn't learn from his mistakes. Think about what Mordecai should have learned from the Margaret situation. He should have learned that you can't force relationships to work through willpower alone. He should have learned that sometimes people have to make choices that hurt others, and that's not about you being bad or unlovable. He should have learned that obsessing over someone who's moved on is unhealthy and destructive. He should have learned that his friends are trying to help him when they tell him to let go. But Mordecai didn't learn any of those lessons. The sweater incident proved that. When faced with even the smallest reminder of Margaret, Mordecai immediately fell back into all his old patterns. He created meaning where there was none. He ignored his best friend's advice. He made terrible decisions and justified them to himself. Nothing had actually changed, except that Mordecai got better at pretending he was okay. The Margaret rejection also set up a dangerous pattern for how Mordecai would handle future relationships. He now had proof, in his mind, that when he really cares about someone, they leave him. Margaret was the girl of his dreams, and she chose college over him. This experience, instead of teaching him resilience, taught him to be afraid. It taught him that opening up leads to pain. It taught him that he can't trust relationships to last. These are terrible lessons to learn because they're going to poison everything that comes after. When Mordecai eventually meets someone new, when someone actually gives him a real chance at a relationship, he's going to bring all this fear and insecurity with him. He's going to be constantly worried that she'll leave like Margaret did. He's going to sabotage things before they can hurt him. He's going to make decisions based on protecting himself from pain rather than building something healthy. The show presents Stake Me Amadeus as this tragic, romantic moment. The guy finally tells the girl how he feels, and she has to say no for reasons beyond their control. It's meant to be sad in a beautiful way, the kind of heartbreak that feels meaningful. And on the surface, that's what it is. Margaret made a mature, responsible choice to prioritize her education and her future. Mordecai respected that choice and let her go. That should have been the end of it. But Mordecai's reaction to that rejection, his months of depression followed by his inability to actually move on, transforms the story from a tragic romance into something much more concerning. It stops being about a guy who's sad his crush left town and starts being about a guy who can't function without someone else's love validating him. The depression itself isn't the problem. Being sad after rejection is normal and healthy. Taking time to process those feelings is important. But Mordecai's depression lasted too long and went too deep. He lost himself in it. And when he came out of it, he wasn't actually better. He was just better at hiding how not better he was. Friends and family did everything they could to help Mordecai through this time. Rigby stuck by him even when Mordecai was at his worst. The other park workers tried to include him in activities. People cared about him and wanted him to be okay. But Mordecai couldn't accept their help because he didn't want to feel better. He wanted Margaret back. And since he couldn't have Margaret back, he just wanted to stay in his misery. This is what makes Mordecai's behavior so frustrating to watch. He had people who loved him. He had a best friend who would literally run for miles to try to stop him from making bad decisions. He had support and care and people willing to help him heal. But Mordecai threw all of that away because the one person he wanted didn't want him back in the same way. The rejection at Steak Me Amadeus restaurant should have been a growing moment for Mordecai. It should have been the experience that taught him about resilience, about accepting things you can't control, about finding worth in yourself rather than in whether someone else chooses you. Instead, it became the experience that broke him and never really let him heal. And here's the thing that makes it all worse. Mordecai's inability to handle Margaret's rejection wasn't just about being sad. It was about being unable to accept reality. Margaret was clear about her choice. She told him exactly what was happening and why. She didn't leave him with questions or false hope. She was honest and direct about choosing college over a relationship. But Mordecai couldn't or wouldn't accept that honesty. That's why he drove 20 hours with a sweater. That's why he created stories about signs and meanings. That's why he hallucinated her in the car, telling him what he wanted to hear. Mordecai wasn't processing his grief over Margaret leaving. He was refusing to accept that she'd left at all. And you can't heal from something you won't acknowledge is real. The Margaret rejection broke Mordecai, but it didn't have to. With proper emotional processing, with actually listening to his friends, with working through his feelings instead of drowning in them, Mordecai could have come out of this experience stronger and wiser. Instead, he came out of it more fragile, more desperate, and more likely to make even worse decisions in the future. But at least the sweater incident ended with Mordecai finally throwing the sweater away and accepting that Margaret had moved on. At least he reached some kind of resolution, even if it took crashing a car and hallucinating to get there. That should have been the moment when Mordecai truly let go, when he finally started healing for real instead of just pretending. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Except the sweater wasn't actually the end of Mordecai's obsession with Margaret. Not even close. Because throwing away one sweater doesn't fix the fundamental problems in how Mordecai approaches relationships and rejection. And those problems are about to get much, much worse. Section 4. The sweater incident. Stalking as romance. There's a big difference between being heartbroken and being dangerous. There's a line between missing someone and refusing to accept they're gone. And there's a clear boundary between wanting closure and showing up uninvited at someone's college after they've explicitly moved on with their life. The episode Laundry Woes doesn't just show Mordecai being sad about Margaret. It shows him crossing every single one of those lines. The show wants you to think this episode is romantic. The music swells when Mordecai smells the sweater and remembers all his good times with Margaret. The camera focuses on his sad eyes and heartbroken expression. The whole thing is framed like a tragic love story where a guy just can't let go of the girl who got away. But if you actually look at what Mordecai does in this episode without the romantic music and sad lighting, what you're watching is genuinely scary behavior. Let's start with the sweater itself. Mordecai finds it in the laundry. He doesn't know for sure it's Margaret's, he just recognizes it and assumes. Even if it is hers, there's a completely normal explanation for why it's there. Margaret worked at the coffee shop across from the park. She hung out at the park house sometimes. She could have left a sweater there months ago and forgotten about it. People leave clothes places all the time. It doesn't mean anything, but Mordecai doesn't see it that way. Despite Rigby's warnings, he brings the sweater to his face and inhales deeply. He smells it. He smells clothing that belonged to someone who rejected him and moved away. And the fact that the sweater still smells like Margaret, even though Mordecai claims he washed it, means he's been keeping track of what her scent is like. He's memorized how she smells well enough to recognize it on fabric. This is not normal behavior. This is not what you do when you're processing a breakup in a healthy way. When someone leaves your life and you find something they left behind, The appropriate response is to either throw it away or mail it to them with a brief note. You don't smell it. You don't use it as an excuse to re-establish contact. You definitely don't build an entire story in your head about what finding it means. Mordecai immediately decides that Margaret left this sweater specifically for him to find. Not that she forgot it, that she intentionally left it behind as a sign. He creates this whole narrative where the sweater is Margaret's way of telling him she wants to see him again. He invents meaning that doesn't exist because he can't accept the simpler, more obvious explanation that she just forgot some clothes when she moved away. This is where Mordecai's thinking becomes genuinely concerning. He's not responding to actual signals from Margaret. She hasn't called him. She hasn't written to him. She hasn't given him any indication that she wants him to contact her. She made it very clear when she left that she was choosing college over a relationship with him. But Mordecai ignores all of that because he's found a sweater, and in his mind, that sweater means more than Margaret's actual words and choices. When Rigby points out that women collect clothes, and this probably doesn't mean anything, Mordecai asks if it could be her favorite sweater. Rigby correctly points out that if it was her favorite, she wouldn't have left it. This is basic logic. People don't forget their favorite things, but Mordecai doesn't care about logic. He's already decided what he wants to believe, and no amount of reason from his best friend is going to change his mind. The decision to drive to Margaret's college is where this crosses from sad to scary. Milton University is 20 hours away. That's not a quick trip. That's not popping by to drop something off. That's a full day of driving to show up unannounced at the college of someone who told you she was moving on with her life. Mordecai doesn't call Margaret to ask if she wants the sweater. He doesn't ask if it's okay to visit. He just decides he's going to drive across the country to see her. Think about this from Margaret's perspective for a moment. She made a difficult choice to leave Mordecai and pursue her education. She's been at college for months now, building a new life, making new friends, focusing on her studies. She's moved on. And then her ex-boyfriend, who she hasn't spoken to in months, shows up on her campus uninvited, with a sweater she doesn't even remember owning. How would that feel? Not romantic. Not sweet. Frightening. The show doesn't frame it this way because we're seeing everything from Mordecai's point of view. We're meant to sympathize with him because we've watched him be sad for months. We're supposed to root for him to get closure or get the girl back. But if this was a real situation, if someone you knew told you their ex drove 20 hours to surprise them at college with old clothing, you would tell them to be careful and maybe call campus security. During the drive, Mordecai's behavior gets even worse. When Rigby throws the sweater out the window to try to force Mordecai to turn around, and a cop returns it, Mordecai takes this as another sign. He's looking for signs everywhere because he's desperate to believe the universe is telling him to chase after Margaret. This is how stalkers think. They interpret random coincidences as proof that they're meant to be with someone, that fate is pushing them together, that the other person secretly wants them to keep pursuing. Mordecai drives for so long without sleeping that he starts falling asleep at the wheel. This means he's not just risking his own safety, he's risking everyone else on the road. When Rigby yells at him to wake up and get back on the road, Mordecai barely reacts. He's so exhausted and so focused on getting to Margaret that he's become a danger to himself and others. And he doesn't care. The sweater, the mission, seeing Margaret, all of that is more important to him than basic safety. When Rigby starts rapping about how Mordecai isn't fine and needs to ditch the sweater and move on, Mordecai gets so angry that he kicks his best friend out of the car. They're in the middle of nowhere. Rigby has no way to get home. Mordecai literally abandons him on the side of the road because Rigby dared to tell him the truth about his behavior. This moment reveals how far gone Mordecai really is. Rigby isn't being mean or trying to hurt him. Rigby is desperately trying to stop his best friend from doing something humiliating and potentially harmful. Rigby cares enough about Mordecai to keep trying even when Mordecai doesn't want to hear it, and Mordecai's response is to throw him out of the car and drive away. The fact that Rigby then apparently runs or hitchhikes for hours to try to catch up to Mordecai at the college shows what a good friend he is. Even after being kicked out of a moving car, even after being insulted and abandoned, Rigby still cares enough to try to stop Mordecai from making this mistake. Mordecai doesn't deserve a friend that loyal, not after how he's been treating him. The hallucination scene is where Mordecai's mental state becomes impossible to ignore. He's so sleep-deprived and so obsessed that he starts seeing Margaret everywhere. The laundry in the car comes to life and forms a ghost version of her. And this ghost doesn't just appear, it talks to him, encourages him, tells him what he wants to hear. The ghost Margaret tells Mordecai that the sweater is all that matters. She tells him to forget about Rigby. She promises him that once he returns the sweater, Margaret will quit college and be with him forever. And for several moments, Mordecai believes it. He has a full conversation with his own hallucination, treating it like it's real, like Margaret is actually there telling him these things. This is a psychotic break. Mordecai is so mentally unstable from lack of sleep, from months of depression, from his obsessive thoughts about Margaret, that he's literally seeing things that aren't there. He's hallucinating conversations with the girl who rejected him, and these hallucinations are encouraging his worst impulses. When the ghost Margaret starts getting violent, grabbing the brake, forcing the car to keep going, telling Mordecai he can't fight it, the scene becomes genuinely disturbing. Mordecai is fighting with himself, arguing with his own mind, while driving a car. He's yelling at a pile of laundry that he thinks is Margaret. He's struggling for control of the vehicle with an imaginary person. This is not romantic. This is a mental health crisis. The crash at the end of this sequence could have killed someone. Mordecai drives the car into a statue at Margaret's college and nearly runs over a student who's walking nearby. That student could have died because Mordecai was hallucinating while driving. Muscle Man's car is completely destroyed. Property is damaged. And all of this happened because Mordecai couldn't accept that Margaret had moved on. When Mordecai finally snaps out of the hallucination and realizes the ghost was never real, he should feel horrified at what he's done. He should recognize that he's put multiple people in danger, that he's destroyed property, that he's driven himself to the point of having hallucinations. But the show doesn't really focus on any of that. Instead, it focuses on Mordecai seeing Margaret from a distance and finally deciding to let her go. The scene where Mordecai watches Margaret with her college friends is presented as bittersweet. She's happy. She's talking about her classes and her plans. She's built a new life. And Mordecai, watching from afar, realizes he needs to let her live that life. He throws the sweater away and turns to leave. The show wants this to feel like growth, like Mordecai finally learning to move on. But it's not growth. It's Mordecai finally accepting reality only after he's crashed a car and nearly killed someone. He didn't learn to let go because he understood it was the right thing to do. He learned to let go because he physically saw that Margaret had moved on and there was no place for him in her new life. If Margaret had been standing alone looking sad, Mordecai probably would have approached her. He only backed off because he saw with his own eyes that she didn't need him. The episode tries to frame the ending as Mordecai doing the right thing by not interrupting Margaret's new life. And sure, not interrupting her is better than interrupting her. But Mordecai doesn't get credit for the bare minimum of not harassing his ex-girlfriend at her college after driving 20 hours uninvited. That's not being a good person. That's just not being a complete nightmare in that specific moment. Throughout the entire episode, nobody calls out how inappropriate Mordecai's behavior actually is. Rigby tries to stop him, but Rigby focuses on Mordecai being obsessive and needing to move on for his own sake. Nobody points out that what Mordecai is doing could genuinely frighten Margaret. Nobody mentions that showing up at someone's college unannounced is a violation of boundaries. Nobody seems to recognize that this behavior is only a few steps away from actual stalking. The show presents the sweater as a symbol of Mordecai's love for Margaret. But really, it's a symbol of his inability to respect her choices. Margaret chose to leave. She chose her education over a relationship. She chose to move forward with her life. And Mordecai spent months unable to accept that choice. The sweater became his excuse to ignore what Margaret wanted and focus only on what he wanted. This is a pattern that will show up again and again in Mordecai's story. He decides what he wants from a relationship, and then he pursues that, regardless of what the other person wants or needs. He creates stories about signs and meanings to justify his behavior. He ignores his friends when they try to help him see reason, and he only stops when he's forced to confront reality in a way he can't ignore. The sweater incident should have been a wake-up call for Mordecai. It should have made him realize that his way of handling relationships and rejection is deeply unhealthy. Instead, it just became another thing that happened. Another story he could tell himself about how hard he tried to make things work with Margaret. He didn't learn from it. He didn't grow from it. He just moved on to the next situation where he could make the same mistakes all over again. Fans watching this episode had mixed reactions. Some thought it was sad and romantic. Others started to see Mordecai differently. Started to recognize that his behavior was crossing lines. The people who found it romantic were focusing on Mordecai's pain and longing. The people who found it concerning were focusing on his actions and the danger he created. The truth is that you can feel heartbroken without driving 20 hours to stalk your ex. You can miss someone without creating elaborate stories about signs and fate. You can want closure without putting yourself and others in danger. Mordecai had other options at every step of this journey, and he consistently chose the most extreme, most boundary-violating, most potentially harmful option. But throwing away the sweater didn't fix Mordecai's fundamental problems. It didn't teach him healthy ways to process rejection. It didn't make him understand why his behavior was concerning. It just ended that particular episode, that specific obsessive quest. The patterns that drove him to smell the sweater, to drive 20 hours, to hallucinate and crash a car, those patterns were still there, waiting for the next trigger. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. And that trigger was coming sooner than anyone expected. Because while Mordecai was busy obsessing over Margaret, someone new was about to enter his life. Someone who would actually give him a real chance at a relationship. Someone who would care about him and trust him. And when that happened, all of Mordecai's worst impulses were going to come roaring back. Except this time, he wouldn't just be hurting himself. Section 5. Enter CJ, a fresh start he'd eventually destroy. After everything with Margaret, the rejection, the depression, the sweater incident, you'd think Mordecai would take some time to be single. You'd think he'd work on himself, figure out why he gets so obsessed with people, learn to be happy without needing someone else to validate him. But Mordecai doesn't do any of that. Instead, he immediately falls into another situation with another girl, bringing all his same problems with him. The episode, Yes Dude, Yes, happens in Season 3, before Mordecai even asks Margaret to be his girlfriend at the restaurant. This is important because it shows that Mordecai's pattern of messing up relationships started even before the big Margaret rejection. He was already sabotaging potential connections before he had a reason to be scared or brokenhearted. The episode starts with Mordecai walking to the coffee shop, ready to finally ask Margaret out to a movie. He's been building up to this for a while. He's nervous, but determined. This is going to be the moment when he stops just hanging around the coffee shop and actually makes a real move. But before he can even get inside, he looks through the window and sees something that stops him in his tracks. Margaret is sitting at a table with an orange bird. They're talking and laughing together. And from Mordecai's angle, it looks like the orange bird is in a position like he's proposing. Margaret is saying, "Yes, dude, yes," with excitement. Mordecai immediately jumps to the conclusion that Margaret is engaged. He doesn't go inside to check. He doesn't consider that there might be another explanation. He just sees what he thinks is a proposal and completely falls apart. Mordecai goes home and locks himself in his room. He plays a sad song on repeat. He won't talk to anyone. He's back in full depression mode, just like he was after Margaret left for college. Benson gets fed up with hearing the same depressing song over and over and confronts Mordecai. He points out something really important. Mordecai never actually told Margaret how he feels. He never asked her out. He has no claim on her and no reason to be this devastated over her being with someone else. Benson tells Mordecai that if he doesn't say something to Margaret, he'll regret it forever. But if he does tell her how he feels, at least he'll get closure one way or another. This is actually good advice. Benson is trying to help Mordecai understand that you can't just assume people know how you feel. You have to actually communicate. So Mordecai and Rigby go back to the coffee shop to confront the situation. And this is when Mordecai discovers the truth. The orange bird is named John, and he's Margaret's cousin. He wasn't proposing to her. He was showing her his new prosthetic leg and asking if she thought it looked good. Margaret was excited because her cousin finally got the medical help he needed. There was never any engagement. There was never any romance. Mordecai created the entire story in his head based on seeing things from the wrong angle. This should sound familiar by now. Just like with the sweater, Mordecai sees something neutral and immediately creates an entire narrative around it. He doesn't check facts. He doesn't ask questions. He just assumes the worst and then spirals into depression over something that isn't even real. This is a pattern, and it's going to keep repeating. But the discovery that Margaret isn't engaged doesn't end the episode. Because while Mordecai was being depressed, Rigby did something. He set up a profile for Mordecai on a dating website called Couple Corral, and he got Mordecai a match with a girl named CJ. CJ is a cloud person. She's literally made of clouds, which is normal in the regular show universe where Mordecai is a blue jay and Rigby is a raccoon. When Mordecai first meets her at the coffee shop, they hit it off immediately. They have a lot in common. They like the same things. The conversation flows easily. They decide to go on a date right then and there. The dates Mordecai and CJ go on are actually really fun. They play air hockey, and CJ makes a great shot. They go to a go-kart track and race each other. They walk around town at night talking. Everything feels natural and easy between them. CJ has a good sense of humor. She's competitive in a fun way. She seems genuinely interested in Mordecai and enjoys spending time with him. This is important because CJ represents something Margaret never really was. Someone who's clearly interested in Mordecai from the start. With Margaret, Mordecai spent years hoping and guessing and wondering if she liked him back. With CJ, there's no mystery. She's on a dating site. She agreed to meet him. She's going on multiple dates with him in one night. She's making it very obvious that she's into him. At the end of their dates, they're walking down the street and having a great time. They pass by Margaret's car in the distance. Mordecai sees it and immediately tenses up. Even though he's on a date with someone new, even though he's supposed to be moving on, seeing anything related to Margaret throws him off. He tries to run away to avoid being seen, but it's too late. Margaret and John are getting out of the car. Margaret starts to introduce Mordecai to John, probably to explain that John is her cousin and clear up any confusion. But Mordecai panics. He doesn't want to have this conversation. He doesn't want Margaret to meet CJ. He doesn't want to deal with the awkwardness of it all. So he just runs away, leaving CJ confused about what just happened. Later, Mordecai is still depressed about the whole Margaret situation, still stuck in his own head about it. Benson comes back and basically tells him to stop being so sad when he hasn't even tried to tell Margaret how he feels. This motivates Mordecai to go back to the coffee shop one more time. And this time, he actually does it. He asks Margaret if she wants to go see a movie with him. Here's the problem. Mordecai completely forgot that he already asked CJ to a movie. He double-booked himself. He made plans with CJ during their date earlier, and now he's making the same plans with Margaret. This isn't just a simple scheduling mistake. This is Mordecai being so focused on Margaret that he completely forgot about the girl he just spent an entire evening with. The movie situation gets even more complicated. Mordecai ends up at the theater trying to figure out how to handle this mess he's created. Margaret shows signs of being jealous when she realizes Mordecai is there with CJ. She acts a little weird about it, a little possessive, like she doesn't like seeing Mordecai with someone else even though she's never committed to dating him herself. CJ, meanwhile, is just trying to have a nice movie date with the guy she likes. She doesn't know about Mordecai's whole complicated history with Margaret. She doesn't know that Margaret is the girl Mordecai has been obsessed with for years. She just knows that the guy she's on a date with seems distracted and uncomfortable. And there's this other girl hanging around who he's acting weird about. Then CJ figures out what's happening. She realizes that Mordecai double-booked himself. She understands that he asked her and Margaret to the same movie on the same night. And when she puts it together, when she realizes that Mordecai either forgot about their plans or was trying to juggle both of them, she gets angry. CJ doesn't just get regular angry, she transforms. Her cloud body turns dark and stormy. She becomes a literal storm cloud, growing bigger and more violent as her anger builds. Wind starts whipping through the coffee shop. Things start flying around. The entire interior of the shop is being destroyed by CJ's rage. Mordecai tries to calm her down. He tries to explain and apologize. He tells her it was a mistake, that he didn't mean to hurt her feelings. And eventually, CJ does calm down. She returns to her normal cloud form. But she tells Mordecai she doesn't want to be friends with him right now. She's too hurt and too angry. She leaves and Mordecai is left standing in the destroyed coffee shop, having ruined a good thing before it even really started. Margaret comes out from wherever she was hiding during CJ's storm. She tells Mordecai it's great that he's dating, but she says it in a way that sounds kind of jealous. Mordecai picks up on this. He realizes Margaret doesn't actually like seeing him with someone else. Even though she's never committed to him, even though she keeps him in this uncertain space, she still wants him to be available to her. This episode is important because it establishes several patterns that will define Mordecai's relationship with CJ. First, CJ has a temper. When she gets really upset, she can't control it and she becomes dangerous. This isn't her fault. It's just part of being a cloud person. But it's going to become a major problem later because Mordecai keeps doing things that make her angry. Second, Mordecai can't fully commit to CJ because he's still hung up on Margaret. Even when he's on a date with CJ, even when things are going well, seeing Margaret throws everything off. He can't be present with CJ because part of him is always thinking about Margaret, always wondering what could happen with Margaret, always leaving space for Margaret in his heart. Third, Margaret doesn't want Mordecai but doesn't want anyone else to have him either. She shows jealousy when he's with CJ. She keeps giving him just enough attention to make him think maybe there's a chance, but she never actually commits to anything. This creates a situation where Mordecai is constantly torn between the girl who's actually interested in him and the girl he's been obsessed with for years. The double booking itself reveals a lot about Mordecai's priorities. When you really like someone and you make plans with them, you remember those plans. You don't forget and make the same plans with someone else. The fact that Mordecai forgot about his date with CJ the moment Margaret was available shows where his focus really is. CJ was fun and nice and clearly into him, but she wasn't Margaret, so she didn't stick in his mind the same way. CJ had every right to be angry. Imagine you have a great first date with someone. You make plans to see a movie together. You're excited about it. Then you show up and discover that the person also invited their ex-crush to the same movie. You'd feel disrespected. You'd feel like you were just a backup plan or a way for them to make someone else jealous. That's exactly what Mordecai did to CJ, even if he didn't mean to. The episode ends with Mordecai alone, having messed up with both girls. CJ won't talk to him. Margaret is acting weird and jealous, but still not actually offering him a relationship. He's right back where he started, except now he's hurt someone new in the process. What makes this especially frustrating is that CJ represented a real opportunity for Mordecai. She was someone new, someone without all the complicated history and baggage of his Margaret obsession. She liked him for who he was. They had genuine chemistry. If Mordecai had just focused on getting to know CJ instead of still pining after Margaret, he could have had something good. But Mordecai wasn't ready to move on from Margaret. He wasn't ready to give someone new a fair chance. He brought all his Margaret feelings into his dates with CJ, and it poisoned things from the start. Even though CJ did nothing wrong, even though she was kind and fun and interested in him, she couldn't compete with the fantasy version of Margaret that Mordecai had built up in his head. The really sad part is that Mordecai and CJ could have been good together. They enjoyed the same activities, they made each other laugh. The connection was there. But Mordecai sabotaged it before it could develop into anything real, because he couldn't let go of his obsession with someone who had never fully chosen him. This episode also shows that Mordecai's problems aren't just about being heartbroken over Margaret leaving for college. This episode happens before that rejection. This is Mordecai messing things up when he has no excuse, when he hasn't been traumatized by a big rejection yet. This is just who Mordecai is. Someone who fixates on one person and can't see opportunities with anyone else. The destruction of the coffee shop from CJ's storm is almost funny in how over the top it is. But it's also a warning. CJ's anger is powerful and destructive, and Mordecai just witnessed what happens when he hurts her feelings. He saw the storm cloud, saw the damage, saw how upset she was. He now knows that CJ has this side to her, that when she's really hurt or angry, things get intense. A smart person would learn from this. A smart person would think, okay, if I'm going to pursue something with this girl, I need to be honest and careful not to hurt her because the consequences are serious. But as we'll see, Mordecai doesn't learn this lesson. He keeps hurting CJ. He keeps making her jealous and angry, and every time, he acts surprised when she reacts badly. The episode Yes Dude Yes is where Mordecai and CJ's story begins, but it's also where the seeds of their eventual destruction are planted. Mordecai meets a great girl, has amazing dates with her, and immediately messes it up because of his Margaret obsession. CJ shows that she has a temper and can be dangerous when upset. Margaret reveals she wants to keep Mordecai interested in her even though she won't date him. All the pieces are in place for a complete disaster. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. And that disaster is coming. Because eventually, Mordecai and CJ will try again. They'll actually date for real. CJ will give him a second chance despite how he treated her in this episode. She'll trust him and care about him and try to build something real with him. And when that happens, when CJ is finally fully committed to Mordecai and believes in their relationship, Margaret is going to walk back into his life and ruin absolutely everything. Section 6. Merry Christmas, Mordecai. The kiss that changed everything. By season 6, Mordecai and CJ have gotten back together. Despite the disaster of their first meeting, despite the double booking incident, CJ gave Mordecai another chance. They're officially dating now. They're in a real relationship. Mordecai has an actual girlfriend who cares about him and trusts him. This should be a good thing. This should be Mordecai finally moving forward with his life, finally letting go of his Margaret obsession and building something real with someone who's actually available. But Mordecai hasn't let go of Margaret. He's just gotten better at pretending he has. The episode Merry Christmas, Mordecai happens during the Christmas season in season 6. Eileen is throwing a Christmas party at her house. She's invited all her friends from the park: Mordecai, Rigby, Benson, Skips, Muscle Man, everyone. CJ is coming as Mordecai's girlfriend. It's supposed to be a fun, festive party where everyone hangs out and celebrates the holidays together. Then Eileen mentions to Mordecai that Margaret is also coming to the party. Margaret is back in town. She's not away at college anymore. She finished her journalism degree and got a job as a news reporter at the local TV station. She's living nearby again. And Eileen, being Margaret's best friend, naturally invited her to the Christmas party. When Mordecai hears that Margaret will be at the party, he does a spit take. He literally spits out his drink in shock. This is his immediate, uncontrolled reaction to hearing that his ex-crush will be in the same room as his current girlfriend. Not mild concern, not slight nervousness, full-on panic that he can't hide. Think about what this reaction reveals. If Mordecai was truly over Margaret, if he'd actually moved on like he claims, hearing she'll be at a party shouldn't make him spit out his drink. He might feel a little awkward, sure. Seeing an ex-crush can be uncomfortable. But a spit take? That's the reaction of someone who's terrified because they know they still have feelings they shouldn't have. CJ notices Mordecai acting weird when Eileen mentions Margaret. She can see something is off, but Mordecai reassures her that everything is fine. He tells her he's totally over Margaret. He acts like CJ is worrying about nothing. He makes it seem like CJ is being insecure for even thinking about it. This is Mordecai lying to CJ's face about his feelings, making her doubt her own very correct instincts. The party arrives and Mordecai is a nervous wreck. He's not enjoying himself. He's not being present with CJ. He's constantly on edge, worried about when Margaret will show up and what will happen when she does. CJ is trying to have a nice time at the party with her boyfriend, but her boyfriend is barely paying attention to her because he's so focused on his ex-crush. When Margaret finally arrives, the awkwardness reaches painful levels. Mordecai has to introduce CJ and Margaret to each other. These are the two main girls in his romantic life, the one he's been obsessed with for years, and the one he's actually dating now. They're meeting for the first time, and Mordecai has to facilitate that meeting without making it weird. He fails spectacularly. Mordecai tries to introduce them. CJ, this is Margaret, my girlfriend. And the moment he says, my girlfriend, the ground literally opens up beneath him. A hole appears in the floor and starts swallowing Mordecai as he realizes what he just said. He quickly corrects himself. I mean, my ex-girlfriend. But the hole gets deeper. He tries again. I mean, a girl I kissed a bunch in the past who's my friend. The hole gets even deeper. The show is using the opening ground as a visual representation of Mordecai digging himself into a deeper and deeper hole with his words. But it's also showing us something important. Mordecai's first instinct when talking about Margaret is to call her his girlfriend. Not his ex-crush, not his old friend, his girlfriend. That's where his mind goes automatically, even though he's standing right next to his actual girlfriend, CJ. CJ watches all of this happen. She sees Mordecai completely fall apart just from introducing Margaret. She sees the ground open up. She sees how flustered and nervous he is. And she has to wonder, if Mordecai is really over Margaret like he said, why is he acting like this? Throughout the party, Mordecai and Margaret keep having these awkward encounters. They're both trying to be normal around each other, trying to act like old friends who are totally comfortable. But every interaction is stiff and weird. They can't quite look at each other properly. They laugh too hard at things that aren't that funny. They stand too far apart or too close together. Everything about their body language screams that there are unresolved feelings here. At one point, Mordecai and Margaret end up talking alone. They acknowledge that things have been weird between them. They both agree they want to get past the awkwardness and just be friends. They start talking about old times, about memories they share from when Margaret still worked at the coffee shop and Mordecai would visit her all the time. This conversation triggers a montage of memories. The show plays a sequence of happy moments between Mordecai and Margaret. Times they laughed together, times they had fun, times when it seemed like they might actually get together. The montage is set to soft music and shows all their best moments, all the times when Mordecai felt closest to Margaret. The montage ends with a specific memory. Mordecai and Margaret riding a roller coaster together. They're sitting next to each other, and as the roller coaster goes through a loop, they kiss. It's presented as this beautiful, romantic moment from their past, a memory of when things were good between them. But here's the thing. This isn't just Mordecai remembering the roller coaster kiss. This is Mordecai and Margaret both remembering it together, in the present moment, at the party. They're standing there looking at each other, both thinking about the same romantic memory, both feeling the feelings that come with that memory. And then it happens. They lean in and kiss. Right there at Eileen's Christmas party. Mordecai kisses Margaret. Margaret kisses Mordecai. They're so caught up in the memory and the moment and the feelings they've been pretending don't exist that they just do it. Except they're not alone. CJ is watching. She sees the whole thing. She sees her boyfriend kissing another girl at a Christmas party. She sees him kissing the girl he claimed to be over. She sees him kissing the ex-crush he said didn't matter anymore. And her heart breaks right there in Eileen's living room. CJ doesn't make a scene. She doesn't turn into a storm cloud at the party. She just leaves. She walks out of the party, gets in her car, and drives away. Mordecai doesn't even notice at first. He's too busy dealing with the fact that he just kissed Margaret. When he finally realizes CJ saw and left, he panics. Mordecai rushes to find his phone so he can call CJ and explain. But when he gets to the spare bedroom where he left his phone, he sees something that makes everything even more complicated. There are boxes with Margaret's stuff in them. Eileen comes in and reveals that Margaret is moving in as her new roommate. Margaret is going to be living right there, in Eileen's house, close to the park, close to Mordecai. So not only did Mordecai just kiss Margaret in front of his girlfriend, but Margaret is now going to be a constant presence in his life again. She's not going away. She's not at college anymore. She's here, permanently, living with one of their mutual friends. CJ is going to have to deal with seeing Margaret all the time if she stays with Mordecai. The episode ends with Mordecai and Margaret looking at each other, both realizing how complicated everything has just become. The camera focuses on their faces, on the tension between them, on all the unspoken feelings hanging in the air. It's a cliffhanger ending that leaves viewers wondering what's going to happen next. But let's take a step back and really look at what Mordecai did in this episode. He lied to CJ about being over Margaret. He acted nervous and weird around Margaret all night, making CJ uncomfortable. He introduced Margaret as his girlfriend by mistake. He reminisced about romantic memories with Margaret while his actual girlfriend was at the same party. And then he kissed Margaret. He actively chose to kiss another girl while in a committed relationship. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't someone forcing him. This was Mordecai making a choice to betray his girlfriend because his feelings for his ex-crush were stronger than his commitment to the girl he was actually dating. He proved CJ right for being worried. He proved that he wasn't over Margaret at all. He proved that every reassurance he gave CJ was a lie. Think about this from CJ's perspective. She gave Mordecai a second chance after he double-booked their first date. She trusted him when he said he was over Margaret. She believed him when he told her everything was fine. She built a relationship with him based on the assumption that he was being honest about his feelings. And then she had to watch him kiss another girl at a Christmas party, proving that none of it was true. The kiss itself is bad enough, but what makes it worse is the context. This isn't Mordecai being drunk and making a mistake. This isn't someone surprising him with an unwanted kiss. This is Mordecai, fully sober, reminiscing about romantic memories with his ex-crush, feeling all those old feelings, and then acting on them. He wanted to kiss Margaret. He chose to kiss Margaret. And he did it at a party where his girlfriend could see. Some fans try to defend Mordecai by saying the kiss was spontaneous, that he got caught up in the moment and didn't mean for it to happen. But that's not really a defense. Getting caught up in the moment means you had feelings there to get caught up in. If Mordecai was actually over Margaret, there would be no moment to get caught up in. He would have remembered some old times, smiled about them, and moved on with his evening with his actual girlfriend. The fact that Mordecai could get so lost in memories with Margaret that he forgot about CJ entirely shows where his priorities really are. CJ was at the same party. She was right there. She was his girlfriend, the person he should have been focused on. But the moment Margaret started talking to him about old times, CJ stopped existing in Mordecai's mind. This pattern, Mordecai forgetting about CJ when Margaret is around, is going to repeat over and over. It's not a one-time mistake. It's who Mordecai is. When Margaret is in the picture, everything and everyone else fades into the background. His obsession with her is so strong that it overrides his commitments, his promises, his relationships with other people. The episode title, Merry Christmas, Mordecai, is almost sarcastic. There's nothing merry about this Christmas for anyone involved. CJ's Christmas is ruined because she watched her boyfriend cheat on her. Margaret's Christmas is complicated because she just kissed a guy who has a girlfriend. Mordecai's Christmas is a disaster because he betrayed his girlfriend and might lose her. Even Eileen's Christmas party gets overshadowed by all this relationship drama. What makes this episode particularly painful to watch is how unnecessary all of it was. If Mordecai had just been honest with himself and CJ from the beginning, if he'd admitted he still had feelings for Margaret, this could have been avoided. CJ could have decided whether she wanted to date someone who wasn't over his ex. Mordecai could have figured out his feelings before committing to a relationship. Nobody had to get hurt this badly. But Mordecai wanted to have it both ways. He wanted to date CJ because she was available and interested and good for his ego. But he also wanted to keep his feelings for Margaret alive because she was still his dream girl, the one he'd been chasing for years. He thought he could manage both, date CJ while pining for Margaret, without anyone getting hurt. He was wrong. The kiss at the Christmas party is the moment when Mordecai's lies catch up with him. He can't pretend to be over Margaret anymore. CJ saw the truth. Margaret knows the truth. Everyone at the party probably figured out the truth. Mordecai's carefully maintained story about having moved on completely falls apart. because he couldn't control himself for one evening. And here's what makes Mordecai's behavior even worse. He had every opportunity to avoid this situation. When Eileen first told him Margaret would be at the party, he could have talked to CJ honestly about feeling nervous. When he arrived at the party, he could have focused on CJ and kept interactions with Margaret brief and friendly. When he found himself alone with Margaret, he could have kept the conversation light instead of diving into romantic memories. When he felt the urge to kiss her, he could have stepped back and remembered his girlfriend. But at every single decision point, Mordecai chose wrong. The aftermath of this episode reverberates through the rest of the series. This kiss becomes the moment that defines Mordecai's relationship with CJ. It's the betrayal that CJ will remember every time things get complicated. It's the proof that Mordecai can't be trusted around Margaret. It's the crack in their relationship that will eventually break them apart completely. Some viewers stopped rooting for Mordecai after this episode. They saw him kiss Margaret and realized he didn't deserve CJ. They saw how he lied and betrayed someone who trusted him, and they couldn't support that anymore. The show was trying to create romantic tension with the love triangle, but what it actually created was proof that Mordecai is a bad boyfriend who can't commit to the person he's with. The reveal that Margaret is moving in with Eileen adds insult to injury. It means this won't be the last time Mordecai has to deal with Margaret being around. She's going to be at future parties, at friend gatherings, at park events. CJ is going to have to see her all the time. And every single time, CJ will remember watching Mordecai kiss her at the Christmas party. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But if you think one kiss at a Christmas party is as bad as Mordecai's behavior gets, you're underestimating just how much worse he can make things. Because the Christmas kiss was just the beginning of a pattern. Soon, Mordecai would create a situation so uncomfortable, so filled with jealousy and lies, that CJ would transform into a literal storm powerful enough to nearly kill everyone in a helicopter. Section 7. 1000th Chopper Flight Party. Jealousy Justified. After the Christmas kiss disaster, Mordecai and CJ somehow managed to work things out. The next episode shows them getting back together. CJ forgives Mordecai for kissing Margaret. She gives him yet another chance, even though he's already proven he can't be trusted around his ex-crush. This shows how much CJ cares about Mordecai and how willing she is to believe he can do better. She wants to trust him. She wants their relationship to work. But Mordecai hasn't actually changed. He's just apologized and promised to do better without addressing any of the actual problems in how he handles Margaret. And the episode 1000th Chopper Flight Party proves this in the most dramatic way possible. The episode starts with Mordecai, Rigby, CJ, and Eileen hanging out together watching TV at the park house. Everything seems normal and relaxed. Then Benson comes in with the mail. He hands Mordecai and Rigby green envelopes. They're invitations to a special party. It's the 1000th flight party for Chopper 6, the news helicopter that Margaret's father Frank flies for his job. CJ immediately tells them she can't go to the party. She's volunteering that day to clean up a river with some friends. She seems disappointed to miss it, but she's committed to helping with the environmental cleanup. Mordecai tells her not to worry. He promises to bring her back a slice of cake from the party so she doesn't feel left out. This is where Rigby says something that reveals the real issue. He mentions that it's probably better CJ isn't coming anyway since Margaret will be there. The moment Rigby says Margaret's name, Mordecai punches him in the arm. Hard. He's angry that Rigby brought it up. Angry that Rigby is acknowledging the obvious tension between Mordecai and Margaret. Think about what this reaction means. If Mordecai was truly okay with Margaret being at the party, if he really was over her like he keeps claiming, Rigby's comment wouldn't make him violent. He'd just shrug it off or agree that it might be slightly awkward, but no big deal. Instead, he physically hits Rigby for stating a simple fact, that having Margaret at a party Mordecai is attending might create problems. When they arrive at Frank's house for the party, Mordecai is already on edge. He's nervous. He's uncomfortable. He knows Margaret will be there, and he knows he can't handle being around her normally. Frank greets Mordecai warmly and introduces him to his co-worker, Jackie Carmichael. They talk about how one special guest will get to ride in the helicopter for its 1000th flight. Mordecai asks Frank if he can get a slice of cake for CJ. He mentions that CJ is his new girlfriend. When Frank hears this, his face changes. He looks visibly angry for a moment before covering it up. Frank clearly wanted Mordecai to end up with his daughter Margaret, not with some other girl. He's disappointed and upset that Mordecai has moved on, even though Margaret is the one who left for college in the first place. Then Margaret shows up with her news crew. She's there to report on her father's special flight. When she arrives, Frank gets this sneaky look on his face and brings both Mordecai and Margaret together, putting his hands on both their shoulders. He's clearly trying to push them together, trying to create moments for them to interact. hoping something will happen between them. Mordecai sees Margaret and immediately makes an excuse to leave. He tells Rigby he needs to use the bathroom, but he doesn't actually need the bathroom. He's hiding. Mordecai locks himself in the bathroom to avoid being around Margaret. Rigby has to knock on the door and tell him he's being weird, that he needs to come out and stop acting like this. Mordecai refuses. He says if he stays in the bathroom, he can't mess anything up. He's so scared of being around Margaret, so aware that he can't control himself when she's near, that he'd rather hide in a bathroom for the entire party than risk another situation like the Christmas kiss. This is his solution to the Margaret problem. Avoid her completely rather than learn to be normal around her. But Mordecai can't hide forever. When it's time to cut the cake, Frank makes an announcement. He's going to choose one lucky person to ride along in the helicopter for the 1,000th flight. Jackie assumes it'll be her since she's Frank's longtime co-worker. But Frank chooses Mordecai instead. Mordecai panics. He doesn't want this. He grabs a slice of cake and tries to leave immediately, saying he needs to get the cake to CJ. But Frank stops him. Frank explains that he was a bit rude earlier when he found out Mordecai had a new girlfriend, and he wants to apologize. He says Mordecai will always be part of the family, regardless of whether he's dating Margaret. He's being kind and welcoming, making it impossible for Mordecai to say no without being incredibly rude. So Mordecai gets on the helicopter. Margaret is there too, as part of the news crew. They take off, and now Mordecai is trapped in a small space with Margaret, high in the air, unable to escape or hide in a bathroom. Frank and his wife Denise are there too, flying the helicopter and enjoying the moment. Margaret tries to make conversation. She asks Mordecai general questions about his life, but Mordecai dodges every single one. He gives short answers. He won't really engage with her. He's so focused on not saying or doing anything wrong that he can barely speak to her at all. Margaret gets frustrated with this. She scolds him, asking why he's still acting weird about what happened at Christmas. She points out that they should be able to just be friends. She wants to know why Mordecai can't have a normal conversation with her. Her frustration is understandable. From her perspective, they kissed once, it was a mistake, and now they should move past it. But she doesn't fully understand how Mordecai feels about her, or how hard it is for him to be around her. Something about Margaret calling him out breaks through Mordecai's nervousness. He stops being so stiff and awkward. He makes a joke, pretending to give a news report like Margaret does for her job. This makes everyone laugh. The tension lifts. Suddenly, Mordecai and Margaret are having a fun, natural conversation. They're joking around and enjoying each other's company. Frank and Denise join in, and everyone in the helicopter is having a great time. Down on the ground, Rigby and Eileen are watching the helicopter fly overhead. Then CJ walks up behind them. The river cleanup had to stop early because someone got exposed to one of the chemicals that had been dumped in the river. Since the cleanup ended, CJ is free to come to the party after all. She's excited to see Mordecai and spend time with him. Eileen looks nervous when she sees CJ arrive. She knows Mordecai is up in that helicopter with Margaret. She knows this looks bad. She knows CJ is about to see something that will hurt her. CJ looks up at the helicopter. From the ground, she can see into it. She can see Mordecai and Margaret sitting together, laughing and talking. She can see how comfortable they look with each other. She can see her boyfriend having the time of his life with the girl he kissed at the Christmas party, the girl he claimed not to have feelings for anymore. CJ's face changes. She starts to get angry. And when CJ gets angry, she doesn't stay in control of her cloud powers. She starts to transform. Her body turns dark. Storm clouds gather around her. Wind begins to pick up. Rigby and Eileen realize what's happening. They try to calm CJ down. They try to explain. But CJ is too hurt and too angry to listen. She's watching her boyfriend laugh with another girl in a helicopter, and every fear she had about Mordecai still having feelings for Margaret is being confirmed right in front of her eyes. CJ transforms fully into a massive storm cloud. She rises up into the air, growing bigger and more powerful. She reaches the helicopter and surrounds it with violent winds and storms. Inside the helicopter, everyone is terrified. The helicopter starts shaking wildly. Denise gets thrown around and hurt. Margaret is scared. Frank is trying to control the helicopter but can't because of the storm. Mordecai yells above the wind, trying to explain to CJ that it's not what she thinks. He tells her there was just an extra seat on the helicopter, that he didn't plan this. But his words can't cut through the storm and CJ's anger. She's not listening. She's just reacting to the pain of seeing him with Margaret again. Frank, struggling to maintain control of the helicopter, yells at Mordecai. He's angry that Mordecai's girlfriend is causing this chaos on his special day. He says, "No son of mine would bring this to my 1,000th chopper flight party." This is interesting because it shows Frank still thinks of Mordecai as family, even calling him son. But now he's furious at him. Mordecai yells back, "But I'm not your son!" It's a desperate moment where Mordecai is trying to distance himself from the situation, from Frank's expectations, from all of it. The storm gets worse and worse. The helicopter is being torn apart. Everyone inside could die. CJ is so consumed by her jealousy and pain that she's about to accidentally kill multiple people, including the guy she loves. The situation is completely out of control. Then Margaret does something surprising. She yells out that she has a boyfriend. She tells CJ that she's dating Del Hanlon, the weatherman from her news station. She's claiming she has a boyfriend, so there's nothing romantic happening with Mordecai. This revelation is what finally gets through to CJ. CJ calms down, the storm fades. She returns to her normal cloud form. The helicopter stabilizes. Everyone is okay, but they all just came very close to dying. CJ looks at what she's done, at the danger she put everyone in, and she's horrified at herself. She starts crying and flies away, ashamed and heartbroken. Later, Rigby sees Mordecai and CJ in the distance. They're talking. They hug. CJ gets on her bike and rides away. When Mordecai walks back to Rigby, he tells him that he and CJ are taking a break for a while. CJ needs time after what happened. She needs space from Mordecai and all the drama with Margaret. This episode shows a different side of Mordecai's failures than the Christmas kiss. At Christmas, he actively chose to kiss Margaret. Here, he didn't do anything technically wrong. He didn't kiss anyone. He didn't cheat. All he did was have a friendly conversation with Margaret in a helicopter. But the fact that he can't be around Margaret without it becoming a problem is the issue. The real problem in this episode is Mordecai's cowardice. Instead of being mature enough to handle Margaret's presence at a party, he hides in a bathroom. Instead of setting clear boundaries with Margaret from the start, he goes back and forth between being super awkward and being too comfortable with her. Instead of being honest with CJ about how hard it is for him to be around Margaret, he pretends everything is fine while clearly being unable to handle the situation. Mordecai's decision to hide in the bathroom reveals everything. He knows he can't trust himself around Margaret. He knows that if he interacts with her normally, something will go wrong. So instead of working on that problem, instead of figuring out how to be friends with Margaret without romantic tension, he just tries to avoid her completely. That's not a solution. That's running away from the problem. And the worst part is that Mordecai's actions keep putting CJ in situations where her jealousy seems justified. She's not being crazy or unreasonable. She has every reason to worry when Mordecai is around Margaret. He kissed Margaret at Christmas. He acts weird and nervous whenever Margaret is mentioned. He hides in bathrooms to avoid her. And then, when he's forced to interact with her, they end up laughing and having a great time together in a helicopter. From CJ's perspective, she keeps trying to trust Mordecai, and he keeps proving he can't be trusted. She forgave the Christmas kiss. She believed him when he said it wouldn't happen again. She tried to be understanding and supportive. And then she shows up to a party and sees her boyfriend looking happier with his ex-crush than he ever looks with her. CJ's storm cloud reaction is extreme and dangerous, yes. She almost killed people. That's not okay. But her anger is completely understandable. Anyone would be furious in her position. The only difference is that most people can't turn into literal storms when they're upset. The episode ends with another crack in Mordecai and CJ's relationship. They're taking a break. CJ needs time away from him. And even though they might get back together eventually, this moment of seeing Mordecai with Margaret in the helicopter is going to stay with CJ. It's going to make her more insecure, more worried, more likely to assume the worst when situations with Margaret come up. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But CJ doesn't know the most disturbing part of what happened. Margaret's claim about having a boyfriend? That was a lie. She made it up to calm CJ down and stop her from destroying the helicopter. Margaret isn't actually dating Del Hanlon. She lied to save everyone's lives, but that lie is going to create even more problems down the line. And when the truth comes out, when CJ discovers that Margaret lied about the boyfriend, every bit of trust she's tried to rebuild with Mordecai is going to shatter completely. Section 8. Dumped at the Altar. The Wedding Speech Disaster. The episode Dumped at the Altar is the Season 6 finale. It's the episode that made huge numbers of fans completely turn on Mordecai. Before this episode, some people still defended him. They thought he was just confused or going through a hard time with his feelings. After this episode aired, very few people could defend what Mordecai did. This is the moment when Mordecai revealed just how selfish he could be. The episode starts at sunrise, with Mordecai and Rigby sitting on the roof of the house, drinking sodas. Rigby asks Mordecai how things are going with CJ now that Margaret has admitted she still has feelings for him. This is important context. In an episode before this one called Not Great Double Date, Margaret confessed to CJ that she still has romantic feelings for Mordecai. So everyone knows the situation is complicated. Everyone knows Mordecai is caught between two girls. Mordecai tells Rigby he hasn't had a chance to talk to CJ about Margaret's confession. CJ has had friends visiting from out of town, so they haven't been able to have a serious conversation about where their relationship stands. Then CJ calls Mordecai. Rigby tells him not to be afraid of his feelings. Mordecai answers the phone and has what seems like a normal conversation with CJ. They talk about their plans for the day. When he hangs up, he tells Rigby that everything is fine between them. But everything is not fine. Mordecai is lying to Rigby and probably to himself. He's pretending the situation with Margaret doesn't matter, that he can just ignore it and everything will work out. He's avoiding the hard conversation he needs to have with CJ about his feelings. The main event of the episode is Muscle Man's wedding to his girlfriend, Starla. The whole park crew is helping prepare for the wedding. It's supposed to be a happy day celebrating Muscle Man finally getting married to the girl he loves. But Muscle Man is incredibly anxious and nervous. At one point, he destroys an ice sculpture during a panic attack. Benson has to calm him down. Mordecai and Rigby are in charge of setting up chairs for the wedding ceremony. While they're working, Mordecai gets a call from Margaret. She's helping Starla get ready for the wedding, along with Eileen. Margaret tells Mordecai that Starla is being difficult and high maintenance. It's a casual, friendly conversation. But it shows that Mordecai and Margaret are still in regular contact, still comfortable talking to each other. During the wedding preparations, Muscle Man has a breakdown. He starts crying and says he can't go through with the wedding without guidance from his father. The problem is that Muscle Man's father, who everyone calls Muscle Dad, is dead. But before he died, Muscle Dad left Muscle Man a letter to read on his wedding day. The letter is supposed to give Muscle Man the advice and support he needs. Mordecai and Rigby rush to find the letter. They search everywhere and finally locate it just in time. They bring it to the wedding ceremony. Muscle Man is at the altar with Starla. All the guests are seated and watching. Everyone is dressed up and ready for the ceremony to begin. This is Muscle Man's special day, the moment he's been waiting for. Muscle Man opens the letter, but he's too emotional to read it out loud. He hands it to Mordecai and begs him to read it for everyone. Mordecai takes the letter and starts reading. Muscle Dad's letter talks about how Muscle Man has found his true soulmate in Starla. The letter gives advice about trusting your gut when it comes to love, about knowing when you've found the right person. As Mordecai reads this letter about soulmates and trusting your gut, he starts looking around the room. He looks at Margaret. He looks at CJ. He's clearly thinking about his own situation while reading advice meant for Muscle Man. The letter is affecting him personally, making him think about his own romantic confusion. Then Mordecai does something unforgivable. He stops reading the letter. He interrupts Muscle Man's wedding ceremony, and he starts giving his own speech about his own relationship problems. Mordecai tells everyone at the wedding that he used to think soulmates didn't exist. But after watching Muscle Man and Starla, who are clearly perfect for each other, he's changed his mind. He believes in soulmates now. The problem is, he doesn't know who his soulmate is. As he's talking, Mordecai starts pointing around the room randomly. He points at different people in the audience and suggests that maybe one of them could be his soulmate. He's asking the crowd if his soulmate might be among them. He points at several people. But he never points at CJ. His actual girlfriend is sitting right there in the audience, and he doesn't even gesture in her direction. Then Mordecai says he's been ignoring his gut for a long time. He says he didn't want to hurt anyone, but by avoiding the truth about his feelings, he's made everyone around him miserable. He announces that for the first time, he's going to take Rigby's advice and follow his gut. He turns to CJ and says, "CJ, I need to tell you." CJ stands up and cuts him off. She's angry and she's crying. She tells him to stop, that she already knows what he's going to say. She can see where this is going. Mordecai was about to break up with her, in front of everyone, at someone else's wedding. CJ says, "You don't know who your soulmate is?" Her voice is full of pain and disbelief. Then she pulls off the charm bracelet that Mordecai gave her in an earlier episode when they officially became a couple. She gives it back to him. And then she says the line that cuts deepest. "You didn't even point in my direction." She runs out of the wedding ceremony crying. Mordecai tries to call after her, but she's gone. Muscle Man, who has been standing at the altar this whole time watching Mordecai hijack his wedding, asks sarcastically if Mordecai is finished. He asks if it's okay for him to actually get married now. He points out that the sooner they finish the ceremony, the sooner they can start up the deep fryers for the wedding food. Mordecai apologizes and says yes, Muscle Man can continue. Then Mordecai runs after CJ to try to talk to her. Muscle Man turns to Starla, says I do, and steps on a glass to finish the ceremony. The wedding continues without Mordecai there. Outside, Rigby is standing with 2 sodas. He sees Mordecai and CJ in the distance talking. He watches them hug. Then CJ gets on her bike and rides away. Mordecai walks back to Rigby, looking defeated. He tells Rigby that he and CJ are taking a break for a while. Rigby looks at Mordecai and asks him a question that perfectly sums up how ridiculous Mordecai's behavior was. He says, "So when I said go with your gut, did you hear completely lose your mind and try to dump your girlfriend at a wedding?" Mordecai just puts his face in his hand, embarrassed and ashamed. Let's break down exactly what Mordecai did wrong in this episode. First, he hijacked someone else's wedding to talk about his own relationship problems. Muscle Man's wedding day was supposed to be about Muscle Man and Starla. Mordecai made it about himself. He took a moment that was supposed to celebrate his friend's happiness and turned it into drama about his own confusion over which girl he likes. Second, he tried to break up with his girlfriend in public. Breaking up with someone is hard enough when you do it privately and respectfully. Mordecai was going to dump CJ in front of all their friends, co-workers, and a room full of wedding guests. That's humiliating. That's cruel. Even if he had legitimate reasons for wanting to end the relationship, doing it publicly at a wedding is indefensible. Third, he made a whole speech about not knowing who his soulmate is, while his girlfriend sat right there listening. Imagine being CJ in that moment. Your boyfriend is talking about soulmates and pointing at random people in the crowd, wondering if one of them might be his perfect match. And he never once looks at you. He never considers that maybe you could be his soulmate. That's not just hurtful, it's devastating. Fourth, the whole situation was completely avoidable. Mordecai chose to interrupt the wedding. Nobody forced him. He was just supposed to read Muscle Dad's letter and then let Muscle Man continue with the ceremony. But Mordecai made a choice to take the spotlight and air his personal issues instead. The fans' reaction to this episode was intense. Many people said this was the single most unwatchable moment in regular show history. Some viewers actually stopped watching the series after this episode because they couldn't stand Mordecai anymore. Forum discussions and reviews from when the episode aired showed just how angry people were at Mordecai's behavior. One fan wrote, "This is Mordecai's worst episode in the entire series so far, making his speech in the middle of one of his closest friends' wedding, just to ruin his relationship with CJ, just for a girl who barely even expressed her feelings towards him." Another said, "Many fans even called this episode as the single most unwatchable moment in regular show history." The show's creators later confirmed through interviews that CJ didn't just take a break from Mordecai. She actually dumped him. And she didn't just dump him. She cut off all contact with him and with everyone in his friend group. She stopped talking to Mordecai, stopped talking to Rigby, stopped talking to Eileen, stopped talking to Margaret. She completely removed herself from their lives because being around any of them reminded her of how Mordecai humiliated her. Think about how badly Mordecai must have hurt CJ for her to cut ties with everyone she knew through him. Eileen was her friend. Rigby had become her friend too. But the pain of what Mordecai did was so intense that she couldn't even maintain those friendships. Being around anyone connected to Mordecai was too painful. The episode is called Dumped at the Altar, and while Muscle Man and Starla do successfully get married, the title really refers to CJ being dumped, or almost being dumped, in front of everyone at the wedding altar. It's a play on the phrase, left at the altar, which means being abandoned on your wedding day. Mordecai didn't leave CJ at an altar, but he tried to publicly dump her at someone else's altar, which might actually be worse. What makes Mordecai's behavior especially infuriating is that he had so many better options. If he really wasn't sure about his feelings for CJ, he could have talked to her privately before the wedding. If he realized during the wedding that he needed to end things, he could have waited until after the ceremony and spoken to her alone. If he felt overwhelmed by the soulmate talk in Muscle Dad's letter, he could have excused himself and dealt with his feelings away from the wedding. Instead, Mordecai chose the most selfish, most hurtful, most publicly humiliating option possible. And when CJ cut him off before he could finish breaking up with her, when she gave him back the bracelet and ran out crying, Mordecai still didn't seem to understand the full magnitude of what he'd done. He chased after her, but what could he possibly say? What words could make up for what just happened? The worst part is that Mordecai's speech reveals he still doesn't know what he wants. Even after everything with Margaret and CJ, even after all the drama and hurt feelings, he still hasn't figured out his own heart. He's still confused. He's still torn. And instead of taking time to work through his confusion privately, he decided to work through it publicly at his friend's wedding, hurting his girlfriend and ruining a special day in the process. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But this wedding disaster wasn't the end of Mordecai's story with Margaret. Despite everything that happened, despite losing CJ in the most painful way possible, Mordecai was about to get one more chance with the girl he'd been obsessed with all along. And when that chance came, when Mordecai finally got to see what a future with Margaret could look like, his response would prove that all the pain he caused wasn't even worth it. Section 9. Just Friends. Seeing the future and choosing nothing. After the wedding disaster, after losing CJ in the most humiliating way possible, you'd think Mordecai would have learned something. You'd think he'd realize that his inability to choose between Margaret and CJ destroyed a real relationship with someone who genuinely cared about him. You'd think he'd understand that his obsession with Margaret cost him everything. But the universe decides to give Mordecai one more chance, one final opportunity to figure out what he really wants. And the show gives viewers one last chance to see if Mordecai has grown at all, or if he's still the same confused, indecisive person who can't commit to anything. The episode Just Friends takes place in Season 7, after Mordecai and CJ have broken up for good. Margaret is back in town permanently, working as a news reporter. She and Mordecai are trying to be friends, but things are still awkward between them because of everything that's happened. They both know they have feelings for each other. They both know there's unfinished business, but neither of them knows what to do about it. The episode starts with Mordecai, Margaret, Rigby, and Eileen planning to hang out together. It's supposed to be a fun group activity, something casual and friendly. But then Rigby's father calls. Rigby forgot that he's supposed to attend his younger brother Don's ceremony, where Don is receiving his black belt in martial arts. This is a family event that Rigby can't skip. His dad is angry that Rigby almost forgot about it. Eileen decides to go with Rigby to support him and to see Don compete. This is sweet of her, and it shows how their relationship has developed into something stable and supportive. But it also means that Mordecai and Margaret are left alone. Their group hangout has suddenly become a date, whether they intended it to be or not. Rigby pulls Mordecai aside before leaving. He's worried about leaving Mordecai alone with Margaret. He tells Mordecai to be careful, that spending time alone with Margaret might lead to complicated feelings. But Mordecai insists it's fine. He says they're just hanging out as friends. Margaret says the same thing. They're friends having a fun night out, nothing more. Except everything that happens next feels romantic, even though neither of them is trying to make it that way. They decide to go see a movie. When they get to the theater, they find out the movie they wanted to see has spontaneously caught fire. The only movie playing instead is a romantic action movie, where one of the main characters tries to help his partner get with someone they like. The movie is literally about romantic relationships and taking chances on love. Mordecai gets uncomfortable and suggests they leave. They try going to other places. They go to a racetrack with go-karts. When they arrive, there's a couple celebrating their anniversary by racing together. The whole atmosphere is romantic. Mordecai sees this and immediately wants to go somewhere else. He keeps fleeing from anything that feels like a date, even though he's the one who chose to spend the evening with Margaret. Every single place they go, some coincidence makes it feel romantic. It's like the universe is trying to tell them something, trying to push them together. But Mordecai keeps running away from it. He doesn't want to admit that spending time alone with Margaret feels different than just hanging out with a friend. Eventually, they end up at a restaurant called Mr. Yakihana-sama. It's one of those Japanese steakhouse places where a chef cooks the food right in front of you at your table. They figure this will be safe, neutral, just two friends getting dinner. But when they sit down, the chef, an old man named Daisuke, immediately assumes they're a couple. He starts making their food into romantic shapes. He makes heart-shaped steak. He creates romantic scenes out of onions and vegetables. Everything he does is designed for couples, not friends. Mordecai tries to explain they're just friends, but Daisuke doesn't believe them. He says he can see the tension between them, the will they or won't they energy. He says he can't stand watching them dance around their feelings. He tells them he's going to show them something that will help them decide what to do. Using the steam and smoke from his cooking, Daisuke creates images that show Mordecai and Margaret their future together. Not a possible future, their actual future if they choose to be together. What he shows them is incredibly specific and detailed. In the future, Daisuke shows them Mordecai proposes to Margaret. She says yes. They get married and have a wedding with all their friends there. After getting married, they buy a houseboat. an actual boat that they live on together. They have children together. Their children grow up and become professional video game players, which means they make money playing video games for a living. The kids support Mordecai and Margaret financially into their old age. Mordecai and Margaret grow old together on their houseboat, still happy, still in love. And after 50 years of marriage, they die peacefully, together, having lived a long and happy life. The vision shows them dying at the same time, still holding each other, having spent half a century as partners. This is everything. This is the fairy tale ending. This is proof that if Mordecai and Margaret get together, they won't just date for a while and break up. They'll have an entire lifetime of happiness. 50 years, children, a home together, growing old together, dying peacefully together. It's the kind of future most people only dream about. When the vision ends, Mordecai and Margaret just sit there in shock. They've just seen their entire future together laid out in front of them. They know now, with complete certainty, that if they choose each other, it will work. It won't be a mistake. It won't end badly. They'll have 50 happy years together. Mordecai says the future looks really great. Margaret agrees. It does look really great. They both acknowledge that what they saw was amazing, was everything anyone could want from a relationship. They're both smiling, both clearly moved by the vision of their life together. And then Margaret says something that changes everything. She says they're still young. She points out that they have plenty of time. She suggests they should take it easy on relationships for now. She's overwhelmed by the vision, by the weight of knowing exactly what their future together would be. Mordecai immediately agrees with her. He says yes, they should take it easy. They shouldn't rush into anything. They have time to figure things out. They both decide right there at the restaurant that despite seeing 50 years of happiness together, they're going to stay just friends. The episode ends with a shot of future Margaret and future Mordecai looking down at their younger selves, from whatever afterlife or spiritual plane they exist on. Future Margaret asks, how long can they stay just friends? Future Mordecai responds, only time will tell. The implication is that even their future selves know this just friends decision might not last, that eventually they might end up together anyway. But here's what actually happens. They never get together. The series finale shows Mordecai 25 years in the future, and he's not married to Margaret. He's married to a Batwoman named Steph, who's an artist like him. Margaret is still in his life as a friend, but they never became a couple. They stayed just friends forever. This means that Mordecai saw 50 years of guaranteed happiness with Margaret and said no. He saw proof that they would work, that they would be happy, that they would have a beautiful life together. And he chose to walk away from it because they're too young and should take it easy. Think about how absurd this is. Mordecai spent years obsessing over Margaret. He drove 20 hours with a sweater. He kissed her at a Christmas party even though he had a girlfriend. He ruined his relationship with CJ because he couldn't stop thinking about Margaret. He caused so much pain and drama because he supposedly loved Margaret so much. And then, when he's given absolute proof that being with Margaret is the right choice, when he's shown that they'll have the happiest possible ending, he backs out. He gets scared. He decides it's too much, too overwhelming, too certain. He chooses nothing instead of choosing happiness. This episode reveals something important about Mordecai. He doesn't actually want what he claims to want. He wanted the chase with Margaret. He wanted the drama and the longing and the romantic idea of her. But when faced with the reality of actually committing to her, of actually building a life with her, he ran away. The excuse that they're too young doesn't hold up. Muscle Man and Starla just got married, and they're around the same age as Mordecai and Margaret. Rigby and Eileen are building a serious relationship. Being young is not a real reason to reject 50 years of proven happiness with someone. The truth is that Mordecai is terrified of commitment. He's terrified of making a choice and sticking with it. He'd rather stay in the uncertain space of maybe someday than actually commit to something real. And in doing so, he proves that all the pain he caused CJ, all the drama and hurt feelings, all the obsessing over Margaret, none of it was actually about love. It was about Mordecai's inability to make a decision. CJ lost Mordecai because he supposedly couldn't let go of Margaret. She was humiliated at a wedding because Mordecai was so torn between her and Margaret that he had to make a public speech about it. She cut ties with all her friends because the pain of Mordecai choosing Margaret over her was too much to bear. And then Mordecai didn't even choose Margaret. He saw their perfect future and walked away from it, which means CJ suffered all that pain for nothing. Mordecai destroyed their relationship not because he loved Margaret too much, but because he was too much of a coward to commit to anyone. Fans watching this episode had mixed reactions. Some thought it was mature of Mordecai and Margaret to recognize they weren't ready for such a serious relationship. Others were furious that after seasons of will they, won't they drama, the answer was apparently they won't, even when given every reason to. The episode feels like a betrayal of everything that came before it. If Mordecai was going to end up choosing to be alone rather than be with Margaret, then why did the show put viewers through all the relationship drama? Why did we have to watch him hurt CJ over and over if he wasn't even going to end up with Margaret anyway? Chef Daisuke showing them the future was supposed to give them clarity, supposed to help them make a decision. Instead, it scared them into indecision. They saw something so perfect that they convinced themselves they weren't ready for it. They let fear of the future stop them from pursuing the future they both clearly wanted. The final scene with future Margaret asking how long they can stay just friends is supposed to leave things open, supposed to make viewers think maybe they'll eventually get together. But knowing that Mordecai ends up with someone else entirely makes that scene feel empty. Their future selves are asking a question that gets answered in the worst possible way. They can stay just friends forever, apparently, because Mordecai never learned how to commit to anything. This episode should have been Mordecai's redemption. After losing CJ, after realizing how much damage his indecision caused, he should have either chosen Margaret for real or accepted that he needed to move on completely. Instead, he chose the same wishy-washy middle ground that got him in trouble in the first place. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But Mordecai's inability to commit wasn't just about romance. His pattern of making terrible decisions and hurting people extended far beyond just his girlfriends. Because while everyone focuses on Mordecai's romantic failures, they often forget about all the other people he hurt along the way. Starting with his best friend, who put up with more of Mordecai's nonsense than anyone should have to. Section 10. Pulling a Mordecai. When your failures become a verb. There's a special kind of failure that's so consistent, so predictable, that people start using your name to describe it. When someone messes up the same way over and over, when their mistakes follow such a clear pattern that everyone can see it coming, that's when you know the problem isn't just bad luck. That's when you know the problem is who you are as a person. In regular show, the Park crew, Mordecai's own friends and co-workers, start using his name as a joke whenever someone ruins their own relationship through indecisiveness. They call it pulling a Mordecai. When someone can't make up their mind between two people, when someone sabotages their own happiness by overthinking everything, when someone destroys a good relationship because they're too scared to commit, that's pulling a Mordecai. The fact that Mordecai's friends turned his relationship failures into a running joke tells you everything you need to know about how obvious his pattern was. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't something only Mordecai understood. Everyone around him could see exactly what he was doing wrong, could predict exactly how he'd mess things up, and they still couldn't stop him from doing it. Looking back at everything Mordecai did throughout the series, the pattern is impossible to miss. With Margaret, he spent years unable to tell her how he felt. He would visit the coffee shop constantly, make up excuses to see her, build his entire day around opportunities to be near her. But when it came time to actually ask her out, to actually make a move, he'd freeze up. He'd overthink it. He'd convince himself the timing wasn't right or that he needed a perfect moment. When Margaret left for college, Mordecai fell into depression for months. Then when he found her sweater, instead of just accepting that she'd moved on and letting her go, he created this whole story about signs and fate. He drove 20 hours, hallucinated, crashed a car, all because he couldn't accept reality and move forward like a normal person. With CJ, the pattern was even clearer. He met a girl who genuinely liked him, who was fun and interesting and available. They had great chemistry. They enjoyed spending time together. But Mordecai couldn't fully commit to her because he was still hung up on Margaret. He double-booked their first date. He kissed Margaret at a Christmas party while dating CJ. He acted weird and nervous whenever Margaret was around. He hid in bathrooms to avoid dealing with his feelings. And then, at Muscleman's wedding, Mordecai stood up in front of everyone and gave a speech about not knowing who his soulmate is. He pointed at random people in the crowd. He talked about being confused and torn, and he never once pointed at CJ, his actual girlfriend who was sitting right there. He tried to break up with her at someone else's wedding because he couldn't make a decision about his own feeling. Finally, when Margaret showed him a future where they'd be happy together for 50 years, where they'd have everything anyone could want from a relationship, Mordecai said no. He decided they were too young. He chose to stay just friends rather than commit to the happiness that was being offered to him on a silver platter. Every single one of these situations shows the same problem. Mordecai can't make decisions. He can't commit. He can't choose something and stick with it. He wants to keep all his options open forever, never closing any doors, never fully choosing one path. And in trying to have everything, he ends up with nothing. This pattern isn't just about relationships either. It shows up in other parts of Mordecai's life too. At work, he and Rigby are constantly avoiding their responsibilities, never fully committing to either working hard or fully slacking off. They're stuck in this middle ground where they do just enough to not get fired, but not enough to actually be good employees. Mordecai can't even commit to being a slacker. He has to pretend he's more responsible than Rigby while still avoiding work whenever possible. When it comes to his friendships, Mordecai shows the same wishy-washy behavior. He wants Rigby to support him and go along with his plans, but he doesn't want to be a supportive friend back. He forced Rigby into an uncomfortable double date, but got angry when Rigby used his solids to get revenge. He kicked Rigby out of a car for telling him the truth about the sweater situation. He wants friendship on his terms only, without having to make the same sacrifices he asks from others. The show itself acknowledges Mordecai's pattern through a character description that perfectly captures his problem. Mordecai is described as a decent person with enough smarts and good looks. He could be successful with relationships. He has everything going for him. But his insecurity, his inability to be honest with himself, and his tendency to make things way more complicated than they need to be, keeps ruining everything for him. That description explains why Mordecai's failures are so frustrating to watch. He's not a bad person. He's not mean or cruel by nature. He's not trying to hurt people. But he keeps hurting people anyway because he can't get out of his own way. He creates problems that don't need to exist. He turns simple situations into complicated messes. And he does it over and over, never learning, never changing, never growing from his mistakes. The insecurity is obvious in how Mordecai approaches relationships. He doesn't believe he's good enough for Margaret, so he spends years working up the courage to ask her out. When she rejects him for college, he takes it as proof that he's not worthy of love. When CJ shows interest in him, he can't trust that it's real, can't believe someone actually likes him without all the complications he had with Margaret. This insecurity makes Mordecai constantly second-guess himself. He wonders if he's making the right choice. He worries that maybe the other option would be better. He creates these elaborate scenarios in his head where everything has to be perfect before he can commit to anything. And because nothing is ever perfect, he never commits. The inability to be honest with himself is even more damaging. Mordecai lies to himself constantly. He tells himself he's over Margaret when he's clearly not. He tells himself he can be friends with Margaret while dating CJ, even though he knows he can't control his feelings around her. He tells himself he's just trying to do the right thing, when really he's just avoiding making a hard choice. When someone can't be honest with themselves, they can't be honest with other people either. Mordecai lied to CJ about his feelings for Margaret because he was lying to himself about them first. He couldn't admit the truth to her because he hadn't admitted it to himself. And that dishonesty poisoned their relationship from the start. The tendency to overcomplicate things is what turns Mordecai's problems into disasters. A normal person finds their ex's sweater in the laundry and either throws it away or mails it back. Mordecai turns it into a 20-hour quest with hallucinations and car crashes. A normal person realizes they're not over their ex and either works through those feelings or breaks up with their current partner privately. Mordecai makes a public speech at a wedding about his confused feelings. Mordecai takes simple situations and adds layers of drama and meaning that don't need to be there. He creates tests and signs and moments of truth when he could just have honest conversations. He turns relationship decisions into impossible puzzles when they're actually pretty straightforward. Do you want to be with this person or not? If yes, commit to them. If no, let them go. But Mordecai can't do either, so he stays stuck in the middle, hurting everyone, including himself. The park crew turning Mordecai's name into a joke about relationship failure is actually pretty harsh when you think about it. These are his friends. They work with him every day. They care about him. But they've watched him mess up so many times in such predictable ways that they've given up trying to help and have started making fun of him instead. Imagine being Mordecai and hearing your friends use your name as shorthand for relationship incompetence. Imagine knowing that when someone says they're pulling a Mordecai, everyone immediately understands they mean ruining something good through indecision and fear. That would be humiliating, but it's also deserved, because Mordecai had countless opportunities to change his pattern and chose not to. The saddest part about Mordecai's pattern is how unnecessary all of it was. He didn't have to spend years pining after Margaret without telling her how he felt. He didn't have to drive 20 hours with a sweater. He didn't have to kiss Margaret while dating CJ. He didn't have to give a speech at Muscle Man's wedding. He didn't have to turn down 50 years of happiness with Margaret. At every single point, Mordecai had better options available. He could have asked Margaret out earlier. He could have accepted her rejection with grace and moved on. He could have been faithful to CJ and set clear boundaries with Margaret. He could have talked to CJ privately about his confusion instead of making a public scene. He could have said yes to the future with Margaret that Chef Daisuke showed him. But Mordecai consistently chose the worst possible option, the one that would create the most drama and cause the most pain. And he did it because choosing nothing, staying stuck in indecision, felt safer to him than actually committing to something and risking it not working out. This is why pulling a Mordecai is such a perfect description of his failures. It's not about making one big mistake. It's about having a character flaw so deep that it infects every decision you make. It's about being your own worst enemy, sabotaging your own happiness because you're too afraid to take a risk on actually being happy. The phrase also shows how Mordecai's problems affected everyone around him, not just himself. When you pull a Mordecai, you're not just hurting yourself, you're hurting the people who care about you. CJ got hurt, Margaret got hurt, Rigby got hurt. Even Muscle Man and Starla had their wedding disrupted. Mordecai's inability to make decisions created waves that touched everyone in his life. And that's what makes Mordecai's pattern truly unforgivable. If he was only hurting himself with his indecision, that would be sad, but tolerable. But Mordecai hurt everyone who tried to get close to him. He hurt people who trusted him, who believed in him, who gave him chances he didn't deserve. And he kept doing it, kept following the same destructive pattern, never learning from the pain he caused. The fact that the show's creators themselves acknowledge this pattern, describing Mordecai as someone who constantly sabotages himself through insecurity and overthinking, proves it wasn't accidental. This wasn't Mordecai having a rough patch or going through a phase. This was who he was as a character, consistently, throughout the entire series. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But while everyone focuses on Mordecai's romantic failures, on his inability to choose between Margaret and CJ, they often overlook something equally important. Mordecai's selfishness and his pattern of hurting people didn't just affect his girlfriends. His best friend, his boss, his coworkers. Everyone who tried to help him or be close to him ended up suffering because of who Mordecai was. And looking at how Mordecai treated the people closest to him reveals something even more disturbing about his character. Section 11. The collateral damage. Rigby, Benson, and everyone else. When people talk about Mordecai's failures, they usually focus on his romantic relationships. They talk about how he hurt Margaret and CJ, how he couldn't choose between them, how he ruined every chance at happiness he had. But focusing only on his romantic failures misses a huge part of the problem. Mordecai didn't just hurt the girls he dated. He hurt everyone around him, especially the people who cared about him most and tried hardest to help him. Rigby is Mordecai's best friend. They've known each other since childhood. They work together, live together, and spend almost every moment of every day together. Rigby is the person who's been there for Mordecai through everything. And how does Mordecai treat this loyal friend? He uses him. He manipulates him. He abandons him. And he never seems to appreciate what Rigby does for him. The episode Do Me a Solid shows this pattern perfectly. When Mordecai wants to go on a date with Margaret, he needs Rigby to come along and be Eileen's date so it can be a double date. Rigby doesn't want to do this. He's not interested in Eileen. He doesn't want to spend his evening pretending to enjoy himself on a date with someone he doesn't like. But Mordecai doesn't care what Rigby wants. Mordecai makes a deal. If Rigby goes on this double date, Mordecai will owe him 10 solids. 10 instant favors that Rigby can cash in whenever he wants. Mordecai is literally bribing his best friend to do something uncomfortable. He's treating Rigby like a tool he can use to get what he wants with Margaret, not like a person with his own feelings and preferences. During the double date, Rigby uses his solids to embarrass Mordecai. He makes him do humiliating things in front of Margaret. From Mordecai's perspective, Rigby is being a terrible friend and ruining his date. But Rigby is only doing exactly what Mordecai set up. Mordecai forced Rigby into an uncomfortable situation, and then got mad when Rigby didn't just suffer through it quietly. The final solid, the 10th one that Rigby demands, is so embarrassing that Mordecai refuses to do it. The show never explicitly shows what it is, but from everyone's reactions, it's clearly something deeply humiliating. When Mordecai refuses, the house literally starts tearing apart. Everyone's lives are in danger because Mordecai won't keep his promise. Even Benson, Pops, and Skips tell Mordecai he has to do the solid. Skips hears what it is and agrees it's humiliating, but says Mordecai still has to follow through because that was the deal. Everyone is on Rigby's side here because everyone can see that Mordecai is the one who created this mess. He made a promise. He used his best friend as a bargaining chip. Now he has to face the consequences. Eventually, Mordecai does the embarrassing solid to save everyone from the house collapsing. And Rigby records it. He makes a video of Mordecai doing this humiliating thing. He shows this video to other people 8 times before finally destroying the tape. Even after destroying the tape to save their friendship, the damage is done. Multiple people have already seen Mordecai's most embarrassing moment. What's important here isn't just that Rigby got revenge. It's that Mordecai never apologizes for putting Rigby in that position in the first place. He never acknowledges that using your best friend as a prop for your dating life is wrong. He acts like he's the victim when really he brought all of this on himself. This pattern repeats in Laundry Woes. When Mordecai becomes obsessed with returning Margaret's sweater, Rigby tries to stop him. Rigby throws the sweater out the window. He raps at Mordecai about being obsessive and needing to move on. He tells Mordecai hard truths that Mordecai doesn't want to hear. And he does all of this because he cares about his friend and doesn't want to watch him destroy himself over a girl who's moved on. How does Mordecai respond to this concern from his best friend? He kicks Rigby out of the car, literally makes him get out and leaves him on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. Rigby has to run or hitchhike for hours trying to catch up to Mordecai at the college to stop him from embarrassing himself. Think about what this shows. Rigby cared enough about Mordecai to spend the entire night trying to save him from himself. Even after being kicked out of the car, even after being insulted and abandoned, Rigby still chased after Mordecai to try to help him. That's incredible friendship. That's the kind of loyalty most people only dream of having. And Mordecai threw it away the moment Rigby said something he didn't want to hear. He valued his obsession with a sweater, with the idea of seeing Margaret again, more than he valued his best friend's safety and feelings. He abandoned Rigby on a dark road without a second thought, because Rigby was getting in the way of what Mordecai wanted. When Rigby finally catches up to Mordecai at the college, exhausted from running, Mordecai doesn't even seem that grateful. He doesn't seem to fully understand or appreciate that Rigby just went through all that effort to try to protect him. Mordecai is too focused on his own drama with Margaret to recognize the sacrifice his friend just made. Throughout both of these episodes, Mordecai treats Rigby like an obstacle or a tool rather than a friend. When Rigby is useful for getting a date with Margaret, Mordecai will bribe him and use him. When Rigby tries to stop Mordecai from making bad decisions, Mordecai will literally throw him out of a moving car. Rigby's feelings, safety, and well-being never seem to matter to Mordecai when they conflict with what Mordecai wants. But Rigby isn't the only person Mordecai treats badly. Benson, the park manager, also suffers from Mordecai's selfishness and cruelty. In the episode Think Positive, Pops tells Benson he can't yell at Mordecai and Rigby anymore, or he'll be fired. This creates a situation where Benson has no way to discipline them for doing bad work, and Mordecai and Rigby immediately take advantage of this. They water the flowers with soda, specifically Benson's diet soda. When Rigby says at least it's diet soda that nobody drinks, Benson has to tell them that he drinks diet soda. They're not just wasting soda, they're wasting something that belongs to Benson personally. They use a chainsaw to trim hedges and break the chainsaw in the process. They use sandpaper to dry the cart and scratch it all up. Every single task they're given, they do wrong on purpose. And when Benson can't yell at them, they just laugh at him. But then Mordecai and Rigby do something even worse. They admit that they're the ones who have been sending pizzas to Benson's apartment. They're the ones who switched his laundry detergent with coffee. These aren't work pranks. These are invasions of Benson's personal life and home. They've been harassing him outside of work, making his home life worse, just for their own entertainment. When Mordecai and Rigby need to make Benson angry to release his bottled-up rage, Mordecai starts insulting him. He calls Benson a sorry excuse for a manager. He calls him a nasal-voiced loser loner. He tells Benson to go back to night school and learn to have a personality. These aren't playful insults between friends. These are genuinely mean things designed to hurt Benson's feelings. The episode is designed to make viewers sympathize with Benson, to show why he yells so much and why Mordecai and Rigby deserve it. But even in an episode where the show is trying to make Benson the sympathetic character, Mordecai comes across as unnecessarily cruel. There's a difference between being lazy at work and actively trying to make your boss's life miserable, both at work and at home. Mordecai's treatment of Rigby and Benson shows a pattern. When Mordecai wants something, other people's feelings don't matter to him. When he wants a date with Margaret, Rigby has to suffer through an uncomfortable evening. When he wants to chase after Margaret with a sweater, Rigby gets abandoned on the road. When he wants to have fun without consequences, Benson gets pranked and humiliated. This pattern extends to how Mordecai handles his romantic drama, too. He makes everyone around him deal with his relationship problems. His friends have to watch him be depressed for months about Margaret. They have to listen to him complain about his confusion over CJ. They have to manage the awkwardness when both Margaret and CJ are at the same events. They have to pick up the pieces every time Mordecai makes another terrible decision. At Muscle Man's wedding, Mordecai didn't just ruin things for himself and CJ, he ruined things for Muscle Man and Starla too. Their special day became about Mordecai's relationship drama. Their wedding ceremony got interrupted by Mordecai's speech about his own problems. Instead of everyone focusing on the happy couple, everyone was watching Mordecai try to break up with his girlfriend. Even Eileen got caught up in Mordecai's mess. She invited Margaret to her Christmas party because Margaret is her best friend. She probably thought it would be fine since Mordecai was dating CJ now, and everyone could be adults about it. Instead, her Christmas party became the scene of Mordecai kissing Margaret in front of CJ, creating drama and heartbreak that probably made the rest of the party incredibly awkward. Margaret herself became collateral damage of Mordecai's inability to make decisions. She left for college and built a new life. She came back to town with a career she loved. She tried to be friends with Mordecai, but Mordecai kept pulling her back into drama and complicated feelings. Every time Margaret tried to move forward with her life, Mordecai's presence made it complicated. The pattern across all these relationships is the same. Mordecai acts like his feelings and his problems are more important than anyone else's. Rigby's comfort doesn't matter. Benson's peace of mind doesn't matter. Muscle Man's wedding day doesn't matter. Other people's time and energy and emotional well-being are all just resources Mordecai can use to deal with his own issues. And the worst part is that Mordecai never seems to learn or grow from seeing how much he hurts people. After every incident, after every friend he uses, or abandons, or makes suffer for his sake, Mordecai just moves on to the next situation where he'll do the same thing again. There's no real remorse. There's no change in behavior. There's just a pattern of selfishness that repeats over and over. Rigby, despite everything, stays loyal to Mordecai. He keeps being there for him. He keeps trying to help him. He keeps putting up with being used and abandoned and mistreated. That speaks to Rigby's character as a friend. But it also shows how much Mordecai takes that friendship for granted. He knows Rigby will always be there, so he treats Rigby however he wants without consequences. The same goes for the rest of the park crew. They keep inviting Mordecai to things. They keep trying to support him through his romantic troubles. They keep including him in their lives despite how much drama he brings. And Mordecai repays this loyalty by making everything about himself, by using them when convenient and ignoring them when they're not useful. When you look at Mordecai's behavior toward everyone in his life, romantic partners, best friend, boss, co-workers, a clear picture emerges. Mordecai is selfish. He's self-centered. He uses people to get what he wants and doesn't consider how his actions affect them. He creates drama and expects everyone else to deal with the consequences while he moves on to the next thing. This is why pulling a Mordecai is about more than just romantic indecision. It's about being the kind of person who makes everything about yourself, who hurts the people who care about you most, who never learns from your mistakes because you're too focused on your own feelings to see the damage you cause. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. But if you think Mordecai couldn't possibly do anything worse after everything we've seen, after all the pain he caused and all the people he hurt, you'd be wrong. Because the show had one final insult planned for everyone who invested time and emotion in Mordecai's story, and that final insult would prove that none of the drama, none of the heartbreak, none of the years of will they, won't they tension actually mattered at all. Section 12. The Steph ending. A slap in the face to fans. After 8 seasons of drama, after years of will they, won't they tension between Mordecai and Margaret, after watching Mordecai destroy his relationship with CJ because he couldn't let Margaret go, after seeing him turn down 50 years of guaranteed happiness with Margaret because he was too young, after all of that, the series finale reveals who Mordecai ends up with. Her name is Steph. She's a Batwoman. She's an artist. And she appears out of nowhere in the final episode with zero build-up, zero introduction, and zero explanation for who she is or how she became the most important person in Mordecai's life. The series finale of Regular Show jumps forward 25 years into the future. The park crew has all gone their separate ways and built their own lives. The episode shows where everyone ended up, what they accomplished, who they're with. When it gets to Mordecai, viewers see him as a middle-aged man with a beard, glasses, and a beanie. He's become a professional artist, living in an apartment filled with his artwork. Then a Batwoman walks into the scene. She has 3 kids with her, Mordecai's kids. The show doesn't stop to explain who she is. It doesn't show how they met. It doesn't give any backstory about their relationship. She's just there, suddenly. as Mordecai's wife and the mother of his children. Her name isn't even mentioned in the episode itself. Later, when fans asked about her name online, the show's head writer Matt Price revealed on Reddit that he calls her Steph. Another writer, Owen Dennis, confirmed on Tumblr that there had never been any previous plans for what to name her. The character was created for the finale, without any thought given to who she really was beyond Mordecai's wife who isn't Margaret or CJ. The finale shows brief flashbacks to how Mordecai got to this point. After all the drama at the park, after everything that happened with Margaret and CJ, Mordecai quit his job. He left the park. He parted ways with Rigby, his best friend since childhood. He moved to New York City to pursue his dream of being a professional artist. In New York, Mordecai opened a successful art exhibition. His work was displayed in a gallery. People came to see it. And at this exhibition, he met Steph. She was also an artist. They connected over their shared love of art. They started dating. Eventually, they got married and had 3 kids together. That's it. That's the entire story of how Mordecai ended up with the person he spent the rest of his life with. A few sentences of backstory shown in quick flashbacks. No episodes devoted to their relationship developing. No scenes of them falling in love. No moments showing why they work together or what makes their relationship special. Just, they met at an art show, and now they're married with kids. Meanwhile, Margaret is still in Mordecai's life as a friend. The finale shows them still being friendly with each other 25 years later. But they never got together romantically. They stayed just friends forever. Exactly like they decided in that restaurant when Chef Daisuke showed them their future. And CJ? She's completely gone from Mordecai's life. The show's creators confirmed in interviews that after the breakup at Muscleman's wedding, CJ cut all ties with Mordecai and everyone associated with him. She never spoke to him again. She never reconciled with him. She removed herself from his life entirely because the pain of what he did was too much to bear. So after 8 seasons of relationship drama, after countless episodes focused on whether Mordecai would end up with Margaret or CJ, after watching him hurt both of them repeatedly, the answer is neither. He ends up with someone the audience has never met, never heard of, and knows nothing about. This ending feels like a betrayal for several reasons. First, it makes all the relationship drama from the previous seasons feel pointless. Why did viewers have to watch Mordecai agonize over Margaret for years if he wasn't going to end up with her? Why did we have to see him destroy his relationship with CJ if that relationship was never going to matter in the long run? What was the point of any of it if the final answer was going to be, actually, he marries a random bat lady we introduced in the last 5 minutes? Second, it robs viewers of any sense of closure or satisfaction. People invested years of their lives watching this show. They cared about these characters. They wanted to see how Mordecai's romantic storyline would resolve. And instead of a satisfying conclusion where Mordecai either ends up with someone we know and care about or learns to be happy alone, we get a stranger with no context. Third, it sends a terrible message about growth and consequences. Mordecai spent the entire series being selfish, indecisive, and hurtful to the people who cared about him. He never really learned from his mistakes. He never genuinely changed his behavior. And yet, he still gets a happy ending, with a wife and kids and a successful career. There's no sense that he had to grow or improve to deserve this happiness. It just happened off-screen with someone we never met. Fourth, introducing Steph in the finale feels lazy. If the writers knew Mordecai wasn't going to end up with Margaret or CJ, they had 8 seasons to introduce a third option. They could have brought in a new character in Season 7 or even early Season 8, someone viewers could get to know and root for. Instead, they waited until the very last episode to reveal Mordecai's endgame relationship, giving the audience no time to invest in it or care about it. Fans had strong reactions to this ending. Some people were relieved that Mordecai didn't end up with Margaret or CJ after how badly he treated them. They felt like both women deserved better than to end up with someone who had hurt them so much. From this perspective, Steph represents a fresh start for Mordecai with someone who doesn't have all that painful history. But many more fans were frustrated or angry. They felt cheated out of a real conclusion to the storylines they'd been following for years. Forum posts and social media reactions from when the finale aired show viewers expressing disappointment, confusion, and betrayal. People asked why they'd invested so much time caring about Mordecai's relationships if none of it was going to matter in the end. Some fans created theories to make sense of the Steph ending. Maybe Mordecai needed to move away and start completely fresh to finally grow up. Maybe being with someone who didn't know about all his past mistakes was the only way he could move forward. Maybe Steph represents Mordecai finally choosing someone without all the drama and overthinking that defined his previous relationships. But these are just fan theories trying to make sense of something the show itself never bothered to explain. The actual episode gives viewers almost nothing to work with when it comes to understanding who Steph is or why she's important to Mordecai's story. What makes the Steph ending especially frustrating is that it proves the writers knew Mordecai didn't deserve to end up with Margaret or CJ. If they thought Mordecai had genuinely grown and changed, if they believed he'd learned from his mistakes and become a better person, they could have given him a reunion with one of the women he'd hurt. They could have shown him apologizing properly and rebuilding trust over time. Instead, they gave him a completely new person with no baggage, no history, no painful memories. Steph doesn't know about the Christmas kiss. She doesn't know about the wedding speech. She doesn't know about the sweater incident or the helicopter storm or any of the terrible things Mordecai did. She gets the improved, grown-up version of Mordecai without having to suffer through all the years when he was making terrible decisions. This feels unfair to both Margaret and CJ. Margaret spent years being Mordecai's crush, dealing with his awkwardness, giving him chances. When they finally could have been together, Mordecai said no. And her reward for all that patience is to stay in his life as just a friend while watching him marry someone else. CJ gave Mordecai multiple chances after he proved he couldn't be trusted. She forgave the Christmas kiss. She tried to trust him around Margaret despite having every reason not to. And her reward for that trust was being humiliated at a wedding and having to cut everyone out of her life to heal from the pain. She doesn't even get to appear in the finale. She's just gone, erased from Mordecai's story because the damage was too severe. The ending also feels unfair to Rigby, Mordecai's best friend. The finale shows that Mordecai and Rigby parted ways after leaving the park. They went different directions in life. Yes, they're still friends 25 years later, but they're not as close as they used to be. After everything Rigby put up with, after all the times he supported Mordecai through his romantic disasters, after being kicked out of cars and used for double dates, Rigby doesn't even get to stay best friends with Mordecai in the end. Some fans point out that Mordecai ending up with neither Margaret nor CJ is actually realistic. In real life, people don't always end up with their high school crushes or their early relationships. Sometimes you have to go through heartbreak and mistakes before you find the right person. From this perspective, Steph represents a mature ending where Mordecai had to grow up and move on before finding real happiness. But that argument only works if the show actually depicted that growth. If we'd seen Mordecai learn from his mistakes, work on himself, become a better person, and then meet Steph as a changed man, the ending would feel earned. Instead, we see Mordecai make the same mistakes over and over, never really change, and then jump to 25 years later where he's somehow successful and married anyway. The contrast between how the show treats Mordecai versus how it treats Rigby is striking. Rigby goes through genuine character development over the course of the series. He becomes more responsible. He works on his relationship with his brother. He graduates high school. He builds a healthy, stable relationship with Eileen. By the end, Rigby has earned his happy ending because viewers watched him grow and change. Mordecai just gets a happy ending without having to earn it. He moves away, and in the time skip, he apparently became a better person off-screen. But viewers never got to see that transformation. They never got to see Mordecai actually learn from his mistakes or make amends for the pain he caused. The Steph ending also raises questions about what the show was even trying to say with Mordecai's character. Was it trying to show that some people never learn and still end up okay? Was it saying that you can hurt people repeatedly and still find happiness? Was it suggesting that the solution to your problems is just to run away and start over somewhere else with someone new? None of these are particularly inspiring or satisfying messages. And because the show never clearly explains what it wanted viewers to take away from Mordecai's story, people are left confused and frustrated. In the end, the Steph reveal feels like the writers giving up on Mordecai's character rather than giving him a real conclusion. They couldn't figure out how to redeem him enough to deserve Margaret or CJ, but they also didn't want to leave him alone, so they created a compromise. Give him a wife and kids, but make sure it's someone brand new that viewers have no emotional investment in. This compromise satisfies no one. People who wanted Mordecai to end up with Margaret feel cheated. People who wanted him to end up with CJ feel cheated. People who wanted him to end up alone as consequence for his actions feel cheated. Even people who just wanted a satisfying conclusion to his character arc feel cheated because there is no real arc, just a time skip to everything worked out somehow. The Steph ending proves that all the drama, all the heartbreak, all the years of watching Mordecai struggle with his feelings, none of it actually mattered. The show could have skipped all of that and jumped straight to Mordecai moves to New York, becomes an artist, meets a bat lady, and gets married. The 8 seasons of relationship drama were completely unnecessary to reach this conclusion, and that's the biggest insult of all. Not just that Mordecai ends up with someone random, but that his ending makes everything viewers watched feel like a waste of time. If you cut out every episode focused on Mordecai's romantic life, every scene of him pining after Margaret or hurting CJ, the show could have reached the exact same ending in half the time. The relationships that drove so much of the plot ultimately meant nothing. So after everything, after the years of crushing on Margaret, after the Christmas kiss, after the helicopter incident, after the wedding speech, after seeing his future and choosing nothing, Mordecai ends up married to a woman named Steph, who appears for 3 minutes in the finale. And somewhere out there, CJ has moved on with her life. Margaret has accepted being just friends, and fans are left wondering why they bothered caring about any of it in the first place. Conclusion. Mordecai started regular show as the more responsible friend, the guy who seemed like he had his life more together than Rigby. But over 8 seasons, he revealed himself to be something much worse than a slacker. He became one of the most frustrating characters in cartoon history, someone whose name literally became a joke about relationship failure among his own friends. The evidence speaks for itself. Mordecai forced his best friend into uncomfortable situations to get dates. He drove 20 hours while hallucinating to chase after an ex who had moved on. He kissed another girl at a Christmas party while he had a girlfriend. He nearly got people killed because he couldn't act normal around his ex-crush. He hijacked someone's wedding to give a speech about his own relationship confusion. And when he was finally shown a guaranteed future of 50 years of happiness, he said no, because he was too scared to commit. Every section of this analysis connects to the same core problem. Mordecai was fundamentally selfish and incapable of growth. His nice guy act in the early seasons masked someone who would use anyone, hurt anyone, and abandon anyone if it served his interests. His obsession with Margaret wasn't romantic love. It was an unhealthy fixation that he refused to let go of even when it destroyed everything good in his life. His relationship with CJ proved he could have something real and still sabotage it, because he couldn't commit. His treatment of Rigby and Benson showed his selfishness extended beyond romance to every relationship in his life. The Steph ending confirms what the evidence already proved. None of Mordecai's drama mattered. He didn't need to spend years obsessing over Margaret. He didn't need to destroy CJ's trust. He didn't need any of it. He just needed to grow up, move away, and meet someone new. But because viewers never saw that growth happen, because it all occurred off-screen in a time skip, Mordecai never earned his happy ending. He just got one anyway. This analysis matters because Mordecai represents something viewers see in real life. People who create their own problems through indecision and selfishness, who hurt everyone around them while claiming to be victims of circumstance, who never learn from their mistakes because they're too focused on their own feelings to see the damage they cause. Watching Mordecai is frustrating because we all know someone like him, someone who always has an excuse for why their relationships fail, who never takes real responsibility for the pain they create. Margaret deserved better than years of mixed signals and being kept on the hook. CJ deserved better than being the second choice who got publicly humiliated. Rigby deserved better than being used and abandoned by his best friend. Even Muscle Man deserved better than having his wedding turned into Mordecai's therapy session. But they all suffered because Mordecai was too self-absorbed to consider how his actions affected anyone else. The real tragedy isn't that Mordecai ended up with neither Margaret nor CJ. The tragedy is that he spent 8 seasons proving he didn't deserve either of them, hurt countless people along the way, and still got rewarded with a happy ending he never earned. Regular Show wanted viewers to see Mordecai as a lovable, relatable character struggling with romance. Instead, they created a character study in selfishness, indecision, and the consequences of never learning from your mistakes. So yes, there are plenty of episodes that will make you hate Mordecai, but taken together, they reveal something more important. They show exactly how someone can start as the good guy and end up being the villain of their own story, all while never quite realizing what they've become. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.